Chapter 68. Crash. The sound of waves crashing reverberated through the sky. Coo! Coo! The cries of seagulls were mixed in with the crashing of the waves, clearly spreading to every corner. The noon sun was like a huge furnace, releasing unbearable heat, causing the air to distort, causing one's vision to become blurry. It was extremely unbearable. In such an unbearable environment, a ship that was neither too big nor too small, but was the size of an entire floor of a building, slowly sailed over from afar. It swayed up and down along with the rolling waves, moving straight ahead. Noah and Lisanna were on the deck of the ship. However, their attire was completely different from when they first set off. At this time, Noah was only wearing a pair of shorts. His strong and powerful bulging muscles were directly exposed to the air. He stood at the bow of the deck and looked into the distance. Behind Noah, Lisanna was sitting on a chair. She was wearing a white bikini swimsuit that matched her hair color very well. The edges of the swimsuit were inlaid with patterns, giving people a feeling that it was not too sexy. Instead, it was more of a cute and playful style. "It's so hot." Lisanna held a bottle of iced drink to her face. She could feel the coldness gradually fading away. Her delicate and cute face was covered in sweat while a faint blush appeared on it due to the sun's exposure to it. "Why is it so hot?" Noah, who was standing on the deck, was also sweating profusely under the fierce sunlight, but his expression was not as gloomy as Lisanna's. It was as though he was used to such an environment as he replied to her. "I heard the captain say that due to the currents in this area, the weather is like this all year round. So, before we reach Celestial Wolf Island, just bear with it for a while, Lisanna." "But it's really hot," Lisanna said reluctantly, her voice revealing a sense of helplessness. "Big brother Noah, don't you feel the heat?" "Of course it's hot, but I'm used to it," Noah responded intermittently. His eyes were still looking into the distance, looking at the scene where the sky and the sea were separated from each other. "When I was training outside, the summer heat in the mountains, forests, and wilderness was about the same as it is now. I wasn't used to it at first, but I got used to it after I got used to it." Hearing that, Lisanna finally raised her head and looked in Noah's direction, taking in the sight of Noah's muscular physique. Perhaps it was because of the 4 years of hard work and the training of his body, Noah had indeed developed a very robust physique. There was almost no excess fat on his body, the perfect amount of muscles on Noah's arms, thighs, abdomen, chest, and other areas were all displayed. At first glance, not only did he look very masculine, he also gave off an indescribable sense of security and pleasing to the eye. Looking at him directly, it was easy for others to get the impression that he was very strong. If Noah were to put on clothes, he would look no different from a teenager with a normal physique. This was also the reason why Noah's training was very regular and planned. Otherwise, like running with a boulder to warm up every day, Noah would have become a complete muscle man. Lisanna was almost intoxicated by the sight. When she came back to her senses, a new blush appeared on her face. She quickly turned her head and said embarrassedly, "From the looks of it, big brother Noah has indeed grown up." Hearing Lisanna's words, Noah turned his head and looked in Lisanna's direction, taking in Lisanna's bikini swimsuit. Because she was afraid of being hurt by the sun, Lisanna put on sunscreen after changing into the swimsuit. Now, under the illumination of the sun, Lisanna's skin, which was covered with sunscreen, revealed an extremely white luster. Although it couldn't be said to be as white as snow, it shone like a pearl, attracting the eyes of others. Her figure wasn't tall, but it was very well proportioned. Her chest wasn't full, but under the contrast of the swimsuit, it was constantly showing off her existence. Especially when the glimpse of the seductive thighs from the chest position swayed in front of Noah's eyes, it gave Noah a great stimulation. So, even if Noah wasn't shy to the extent of blushing like Lisanna, he couldn't help but look away with an uncomfortable expression. "You're the same, aren't you?" The atmosphere at the scene suddenly became quite awkward. Realizing that the atmosphere had become awkward, Lisanna hurriedly shook her head. Just as she was about to use her mischievous ability to change the topic, she inadvertently caught a glimpse of the scene in front of the ship. After being stunned for a moment, she stood up and pointed forward. Big brother Noah. Look there. Hearing Lasana's pleasantly surprised words, Noah turned his head almost subconsciously. Then, like Lysana, he was stunned for a moment. On the sea not far in front of the ship, there was a strange island there. It was an island, and there seemed to be a smaller island stacked on top of it. In the center stood a very tall and sturdy tree with a very magnificent crown. Noah saw such a strange island yesterday. It was in the sudden illusion. Serious tree. Looking at the huge tree, Noah murmured. Looks like that Sirius Island. Are we finally here? Lysana rushed forward and hugged Noah's arm, shouting excitedly. Big brother Noah. Let's go up quickly. We haven't reached the shore yet, how are we going to get up there? Being hugged by Lysana, who was only wearing a swimsuit, Noah's body stiffened for a moment. Feeling the soft and smooth skin on his arm and the unusually stimulating softness, he raised his voice a little. At least wait until the ship reaches the shore. This ship is too slow. Let's watch me. Lysana didn't know if she had noticed Noah's unnatural behavior, but she let go of his arm and her beautiful body in her swimsuit spun in front of Noah. Take over. Suddenly, a dazzling light burst from Lysana's beautiful body, illuminating Noah's face. Whoosh! A pair of wings appeared from the light and flapped vigorously. The next moment, a black shadow rose from the light and flew into the sky. It was a bird with beautiful green feathers. The size of a bird was about the same as a human's, but when it spread its wings, it was at least twice the size of a human. The bird circled in the sky once before descending and flying to the front of the ship, reaching the same height as the deck. Then, Lysana's voice sounded from the bird's mouth. Let's go. Big brother Noah. I'll take you there. Seeing this scene, Noah was a little surprised. I didn't think that after 4 years, Lysana would be able to accept the soul of an animal of this size. Evidently, Noah wasn't the only one who had worked hard to train and grow in the past 4 years. Everyone else was also growing at their own pace. Including Lysana. Thinking of this, Noah smiled knowingly. He stomped on the ground and leaped up, landing firmly on the back of the bird that Lysana had transformed into. Let's go. Sit tight. Lysana immediately replied with a cheerful voice and flew in the direction of Celestial Wolf Island. Celestial Wolf Island. Whoa. Looking at the large forest in front of her and the unknown light source floating in the forest like a firefly, Lysana let out a cry of surprise. Is this Celestial Wolf Island? At the side, Noah frowned, tiptoed and stepped on the ground. Just like the rumors, the earth and air are filled with amazing magic. Not only that. Noah and Lysana quickly discovered that something strange was happening in their bodies. Chapter 69. Hey, big brother Noah. Lysana's pretty face was filled with hesitation and uncertainty. Did our mana get stronger? I thought it was just my imagination. Noah closed his eyes and felt the vast sea of mana in his body before nodding. Although it's only a very small amount, I can feel that my mana has indeed gotten stronger. Big brother Noah already has a very strong mana, so it's not strange that your mana has grown so little. However, I feel that my mana has increased by about 1/10, Lysana said in surprise. Could it be that this is also because we've entered Celestial Wolf Island? That's probably it. Noah turned his gaze to the huge tree in front of them, the towering Celestial Wolf tree at the center of Celestial Wolf Island. I can feel that the mana in our bodies is being transmitted from the direction of the Celestial Wolf tree. It should be a blessing from the Celestial Wolf tree. To be more precise, it should be a blessing from the Celestial Wolf tree for the members of Fairy Tale. There was one more thing that Noah didn't say. That was, Noah could clearly feel that the portion of mana that was transmitted to him by the Sirius tree was now turning into Noah's own mana at an extremely fast speed, and was added to Noah's already vast mana. Originally, this portion of mana that was being amplified from the outside world should have automatically retreated after Noah left Celestial Wolf Island. However, it was now being completely absorbed by Noah. As for the reason, Noah also knew. 4 years ago, Makarov had said that Noah's constitution was very special, possessing 3 unique characteristics. The first was that he was immune to and could eliminate all negative effects and side effects that indirectly affected Noah's body. The second was that he could absorb all powers that didn't originally belong to Noah into his body, including powers that didn't originally belong to Noah. The third was that he could recover his own mana. Now, the magic that had been amplified by the Sirius tree after entering Sirius Island should have triggered the second characteristic of Noah's constitution. Therefore, all of that mana was tyrannically taken over by Noah's special physique, and benefited the possessor, namely Noah himself. Although the increase in mana was nothing to Noah, who had a relatively strong mana to begin with, it would take a person 1 or 2 years of cultivation to obtain this amount of mana. For Noah to be able to obtain such benefits out of thin air, it was already not bad. At this moment, Noah relied on his outstanding sensory ability to sense that something was wrong. For a period of time, the astonishing magic power contained within the Heavenly Wolf Islands suddenly seemed to become chaotic and began to flow chaotically. Noah was surprised. He squatted down, put his hand on the ground, and began to sense seriously. Seeing this, she understood that Noah had begun his work and seemed to have discovered something. She immediately shut her mouth and watched silently from the side. However, just because she didn't disturb him didn't mean that other existences would obediently watch from the side. Woo! Following a long and drawn-out chant, a huge head poked out from between the tall trees on the side of the forest. It was a strange creature with a neck longer than a python's, a head that resembled a fish's, for limbs like an elephant's, and a shell-less tortoise's body. While it wasn't a magical creature that specialized in attacking humans, the ferocious glint in its eyes when it stared at Noah and Lisanna told them that it wasn't a herbivore. Woo! The fish-headed, elephant-legged, tortoise-bodied creature let out a whistle-like roar again. Like a charging mountain, it crushed the ground and trees as it charged toward Noah and Lisanna. Woo! Lisanna's expression changed, but she didn't panic. Seeing that Noah didn't seem to have any intention of attacking, the courage in her heart burst forth. She passed by Noah and charged towards the strange creature. Take over. The light of magic flashed on her slender body. In the blink of an eye, her silhouette began to elongate at an extremely fast speed. Then, a bloated, purple-furred rabbit with a napkin around its neck charged out of the light and crashed into the strange creature. Thud. With a muffled sound, the strange creature let out a pained cry. Its charging giant body was stopped in its tracks. Ah! Lisanna, who had transformed into a giant rabbit, also let out a cry of pain. She couldn't help but take a few steps back, causing the ground to tremble. Woo! The strange creature's howl had begun to carry some anger. Its python-like neck suddenly shot out like an arrow, bouncing in front of Lisanna, who couldn't react in time and twirling around her like a rope. In the next second, the strange creature tightened its neck and tied up Lisanna, who had transformed into a purple-furred rabbit. Woo! Its fish-like head aimed directly at Lisanna's face. The strange creature opened its mouth, revealing rows of fangs that were sharper than those of a crocodile. It bit down hard on Lisanna's face. Lisanna only had time to close her eyes as if she had been shot. Soon after, a crisp sound of a sword rang out. Clang! Woo! The strange creature's pained cry entered Lisanna's ears. At the same time, Lisanna felt the long neck binding her disappear. She hurriedly opened her eyes and saw the strange creature running towards the forest as if it had seen its natural predator. Thud, thud, thud. 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 Are you all right? Noah slowly sheathed his sword in the scabbard in his pouch as if nothing had happened. Phew. Lisanna breathed a sigh of relief. Her body returned to its original state in a burst of magical light, but she looked a little dejected. In the end, Big Brother Noah still had to make a move, so you still want to deal with that strange creature yourself? Noah patted Lisanna's smooth shoulder and smiled. According to my judgment, while that fellow is a little ugly, there aren't many in our guild who can beat it in a one-on-one fight. Perhaps only those at Naz and Gray's level can fight it. It's already not bad that you were able to hold it back for a while. Is that so? Lysana's expression eased as she looked at Noah. By the way, big brother Noah, did you discover anything? Noah didn't confirm or deny her words. Instead, he looked at the celestial wolf tree from afar, a thoughtful glint in his dark eyes. If I'm not wrong, there should be something on Celestial Wolf Island that's interfering with the island's own mana. So the reason Celestial Wolf Island was discovered by the outside world is because the island's mana is in disorder? Lysana tilted her head in confusion. Then what should we do? Isn't it obvious? Noah chuckled. Find the source of the interference. It was unknown if it was angered by Noah's words, but in the next moment, a dark cloud floated over Heavenly Wolf Island, dyeing the entire sky pitch black. Asterisk rumble. Asterisk a clap of thunder rang out. Asterisk whoosh. Asterisk torrential rain poured down in an instant, drenching the entire island. Noah, who was standing on the outskirts of Celestial Wolf Island, could only stiffen his face and let the rain soak his body. Pfft. Lysana couldn't help but laugh when she saw Noah's stiff expression after making such a bold declaration. She held Noah's hand. Before that, let's find a place to hide from the rain. Noah could only nod helplessly. Chapter 70. Rumble. The pitch-black rain clouds shrouded the sky above Heavenly Wolf Island, and deafening thunderclaps resounded one after another. Whoosh. The downpour didn't seem like it was going to stop anytime soon. Instead, it was getting heavier and heavier. In the forest, Noah and Lysana didn't use any superhuman speed to travel. Instead, they ran forward at a speed that ordinary people could match, so as to avoid wasting unnecessary energy. Not long after, Noah and Lysana finally entered the canopy of the celestial wolf tree. Thanks to the tree's canopy, the downpour had lessened quite a bit. It was almost like a light drizzle now. Because of that, Noah and Lysana didn't want to find a cave to hide in. Instead, they went under a tree to avoid the rain. With the help of the Sirius tree and this relatively large tree, the downpour was completely blocked out. Ha! Lysana took a deep breath and shook off the water on her arms as she complained. Thankfully, I wore a swimsuit when I came. I didn't have time to change after I got on the island, or I'd be all wet. Noah shrugged his shoulders and took out a towel from the duffel bag hanging on top of the knightly sword bag. He helped Lysana dry her hair. Even so, your body is still wet. If you don't dry yourself, you'll catch a cold. Hee hee. Lysana chuckled sheepishly, but she didn't reject Noah's action of helping her dry her hair. There seemed to be a happy expression on her reddish face, and it was clear that she enjoyed Noah's service. When the time comes, can't I get big brother Noah to take care of me? I don't have that much time to take care of someone who's going to catch a cold. Noah knocked her on the head, ignoring her cries of pain. He didn't help her dry her hair and just sat on the ground. If you catch a cold, you'll only cause trouble for Mila and Elfman. Lysana puffed up her cheeks and stuck her tongue out at Noah, making a funny face. However, she still came to Noah's side. Noah was sitting on the ground, leaning against the tree trunk. Lysana leaned against Noah's body as if she was snuggling up to him. Why are they so close? Noah felt the smoothness of Lysana's skin that was pressed against his body in a swimsuit that did not cover much at all. As usual, he was embarrassed. Then, wouldn't that be very inconvenient? Of course not. It was as if Lysana didn't notice Noah's unnaturalness. Not only did she stick closer to him, but she also skillfully hugged Noah's arm and rested her head on his shoulder. At first glance, they looked like a pair of lovers. It's very warm like this. Is that so? Noah could only scratch his cheeks, unable to say anything useful. It couldn't be helped. In the past 7 years, Noah had spent most of his time training himself. He didn't have any experience with love at all. Although it wasn't that he didn't understand it at all, since Noah had read quite a lot of books and knew quite a lot of things. However, many things couldn't be understood just by knowing them. They had to be put into practice for them to be useful. Hence, even though there was a high chance that she meant something like that to him, Noah, who had never experienced something like that before, couldn't be 100% sure. Therefore, every time he felt that Lysana had such feelings for him, Noah couldn't help but have such thoughts. What if it was a misunderstanding? Moreover, even if it wasn't a misunderstanding, Noah didn't know what to do. There was nothing he could do about it. His playmates of the same age as Noah had lived for at least 10 years. Among them, except for Kana, the others didn't have any experience or immunity in this aspect. Everyone else was already like that. Growing up with such a person who had the appearance and intelligence of a 10-year-old, Noah, who had only lived for 7 years, could vaguely sense Lysana's feelings. It was already quite impressive. It could only be said that Noah could only blame himself for being too young. While Lysana was also young, she had been mischievous since she was a child. She was very precocious. The attacks launched by such a person caused Noah to be constantly distressed and helpless. Of course, Noah didn't know that now. In the future, he would be grateful for this experience of interacting with Lysana. It would allow him to not perform too badly in all sorts of situations in the future. Not knowing how complicated Noah's feelings were, Lysana closed her eyes as if she had already fallen asleep. She leaned on Noah's shoulder with a smile on her face and a look of bliss on her face. After a while, she suddenly spoke. After a while, she suddenly said, "Actually, I've always been very grateful to Big Brother Noah. You're grateful to me?" Noah was stunned. Ever since we were young, Big Sister Mira, Big Brother Elf, and I only had each other by our side. Lysana closed her eyes tightly as if she was immersed in her memories. We lived in a very, very ordinary small village. We should have had a father and a mother in the past, but in our memories, we only had each other. Noah didn't say anything and only listened quietly. Sometimes, I would think about how it would feel to have a father and mother who doted on me. I don't know what Big Sister Mira and Big Brother Elf were thinking, but I didn't feel lonely at all. Lysana's tone became gloomy. Everything changed when Big Sister Mira came into contact with the demons of the church in the village and awakened the receiving magic. From then on, not only did Big Sister Mira not smile, but she also rarely spoke. I know that Big Sister Mira has always blamed herself. She felt that she had implicated us and caused us to be chased out of the village. Big Brother Elf also became a little timid because of this, Lysana said with a bitter smile. Seeing Big Sister Mira in so much pain and Big Brother Elf always being afraid of being ostracized by others, I really didn't know what to do. That's all in the past, Noah said when he heard the pain in Lysana's voice. Now, you won't have that experience anymore. Yes. Lysana's sadness dissipated, and she looked up at Noah with bright eyes. And the person who changed everything and saved us was Big Brother Noah. That's not it. Noah shook his head. I just happened to know a little more than you and invited you to join Fairy's Tale at the right time. Even if I didn't appear, you would have known the truth about the power in Myra's body sooner or later. But in the end, the person we met was none other than you, Big Brother Noah. Lysana reached out and held Noah's face, turning his face to meet hers. It was Big Brother Noah who saved Big Sister Mira. It was Big Brother Noah who stopped Big Brother Elf from becoming a coward. It was also Big Brother Noah who brought us into the guild and gave us companions and a new life. To us, Big Brother Noah is such an existence. Big Brother Noah. Lysana's voice became a little emotional. Actually, from that time onwards, ding. Just as Lysana was about to pour out her feelings to Noah, a strange sound interrupted her. Both Noah and the excited Lysana were stunned and turned to the side. Then, Noah and Lysana widened their eyes. Not far away from the two of them, a figure was standing in the rain. She was a very cute little girl about 12 or 13 years old. The girl had a pair of dark green eyes and a pair of small wings on her head. Her long golden hair was very curly and thick, and she wore a thick cloak-like dress. Looking at the extremely cute and beautiful girl, Noah and Lysana were dazed. Chapter 71. If one had to find a word to describe Noah and Lysana's current feelings, then only one word would suffice. Inconceivable. There was no other reason. It was because the girl standing in front of them in the rain was simply too beautiful. Her thick clothes and hair were completely devoid of water, and her entire body was emitting a faint, dreamy glow. The girl revealed a smile under the gazes of Noah and Lisanna. She tilted her head and stood there barefooted, not even wearing shoes. However, Noah and Lisanna didn't feel that there was anything wrong with this at all. Rather, if the barefooted elf in front of them were to wear shoes, it would destroy that almost perfect dreamy feeling and beauty, causing a flaw to appear on her body. Gazing at the scene of the barefoot elf smiling at her in the rain, she was no longer as agitated as before. Instead, she gently tugged at Noah's hand and murmured absent-mindedly. "Big brother Noah, could that be the rumored fairy that exists on Celestial Wolf Island?" Fairies exist on Celestial Wolf Island. It was precisely because of such a rumor that Celestial Wolf Island was nicknamed Fairy Island, and also became the holy land of fairy tale. In the end, whether or not fairies exist on Celestial Wolf Island was something that no one knew for sure. However, if fairies do exist on this island, then Noah and Lisanna would definitely be willing to believe it. In front of him, this young girl was filled with a dreamy feeling. She was the legendary Demoness. Perhaps it was because she had heard Lisanna's uncontrollable words, but the barefooted fairy let out a bell-like laugh. Immediately after, she turned around and ran off into the distance. "Ah!" Lisanna subconsciously cried out in alarm. "Wait!" Noah finally reacted and hurriedly grabbed the cloth bag and luggage beside him. Then, he pulled on the hand of the dazed Lisanna and chased after her. Walala! Fine droplets of rain continued to fall from the sky, sprinkling onto the ground of Celestial Wolf Island. Noah and Lisanna, however, didn't care about that at all. They chased after the fairy girl who was running at a slow pace, making it impossible for anyone to get close to her. Just like that, one ran in front while the other two chased from behind. Unknowingly, after an unknown amount of time, the environment in front of them began to brighten. Even the rain stopped falling at some point. Noah and Lisanna immediately stopped in their tracks and looked around. This was a vast place with walls all around. The walls were covered with tree roots, and there were unknown light sources floating around like fireflies. It was very much like walking into a strange place in a dream. Lisanna's attention completely focused on her surroundings. Noah, on the other hand, stared at a spot not far ahead. His eyes began to fluctuate. That was because there was a huge tree in the place where Noah was staring at. Of course, what was important wasn't the tree, but the thing within it. At the bottom of the huge tree, there was a hole in the tree that was covered with dried grass. There was an old tomb that looked like it had been there for a long time. There was a tombstone on the tomb. It was a tombstone that seemed to have been pieced together by two tombstones. There was a gap in the middle, and in the middle of the gap was a hole. It was on such a tombstone that a ball of flame was burning in the hole, filling it up. Looking at this scene, Noah's heartbeat began to accelerate involuntarily. The scene before him was exactly the same as the one Noah had seen in the fairy's tale yesterday. In other words, the illusion Noah had seen yesterday was very likely not a pure illusion, but a real one. That also meant that there was something that Noah was very concerned about in the burning flame-like object. Those were the feathers that he had seen in the white dream. If yesterday's illusion was really real, thinking of this, Noah couldn't help but walk forward. "Big brother Noah?" Lisanna stared blankly at Noah, who was walking towards the tombstone, as if she was hesitating whether she should call out to him or not. During this period of time, Noah arrived in front of the tombstone and stared at the hole in the tombstone that was burning like a flame. After a while, he tensed up and stretched out his arm abruptly. Wang! When Noah's hand came into contact with the burning flame-like object, a dazzling light burst out from it, illuminating every corner of the scene. "Big brother Noah!" Lisanna turned pale with fright, but she only had time to call out before her body was swallowed by the light. Goo! Noah was also enveloped by the light. Furthermore, the ball of flame that Noah's hand came into contact with seemed to crawl up his hand, bringing with it a dense light that illuminated the surroundings. Noah could feel a strong sense of repulsion coming from the hand that was touching it. An extraordinary force kept pounding against his hand, as if warning him to quickly let go. However, not only did Noah have no intention of retreating, he instead slowly withstood the repulsion and slowly clenched his hand. Wang! At the same time, on the back of Noah's hand that came into contact with the ball of flame, the guild emblem belonging to Fairy Tale blossomed with light. In an instant, as if a heavy door had been opened by a key, the repulsion on Noah's hand disappeared. Then, under the stimulation of the intense light, Noah closed his eyes. His consciousness was cut off from here. In a daze, Noah felt as if someone was calling out to him. Thus, Noah slowly opened his eyes. The first thing that entered Noah's eyes was a blank expanse of whiteness. For a moment, Noah thought that he was having the white dream of the past, but after a while, he denied himself. Because, the white in front of him was completely different from the white in Noah's dream. The white in Noah's dream did not make people feel empty, instead, it was like returning to the state of an embryo, very comfortable. Although the whiteness in front of him didn't give him a feeling of emptiness, it still made him feel at a loss. It was completely different from the comfortable feeling Noah experienced in his dream. When he realized it, Noah realized. In front of him, the barefoot fairy girl was tilting her head and smiling at him. "Good morning. Good morning." A tender and sweet voice entered Noah's ears, making Noah slightly stunned. He responded reflexively, but when he reacted, he was shocked. "You, me?" The barefoot fairy girl smiled to the point that her eyes were closed, and introduced herself in this way. "My name is Mavis. Mavis Viamilio." "Mavis Viamilio?" Noah frowned and muttered doubtfully. "Why does this name sound so familiar?" After saying this, Noah's eyes lit up. Mavis Viamilio. Noah would naturally find this name familiar. That was the name of the first chairman of Fairy Tale U. Noah was stunned as he looked at the barefooted young fairy girl who was smiling at him. "You are the first chairman? It has been so long, but there is still someone who remembers me. How delightful." Mavis' voice became lively, and her beautiful bare feet lightly touched the ground, as if she was touching water, creating ripples. She arrived in front of Noah, raised her head, and curiously sized up Noah's body. "Inconceivable youth, what is your name?" "Inconceivable youth?" No. In Noah's opinion, Mavis was the truly inconceivable existence. Why would the already dead first chairman appear in front of him? Chapter 72. Mavis was standing less than a meter away from him. She was sizing him up with great interest. Traces of light could be seen flickering in her dark green eyes. She had a very gentle smile on her face. Noah muttered to himself for a moment. "My name is Noah. Noah Dole." Noah first reported his name. But unexpectedly, the light of interest in Mavis' eyes grew more and more intense. "Dole? Could it be that you are Yuri's descendant?" Hearing this question, Noah, who originally had some doubts about Mavis's identity, started to have some doubts about it. Yuri Dole. This name was not unfamiliar to Noah. The owner of this name was Noah's grandfather, the current president of Fairy Tale, Makarov's father. In other words, Yuri Dole could be considered as Noah's great-grandfather. Thus, Noah did not specifically deny it. He nodded and gave a simple reply. "Yuri's great-grandfather's son is my grandfather who adopted me. I am the adopted grandson of Fairy Tale's current president, Makarov." "So it's like that." The smile on Mavis' face became somewhat dazzling. She appeared to be very happy. "To think that there's such an inconceivable existence like you in Fairy Tale. Looks like Fairy Tale has become very interesting now." "Hey." Noah could not help but ask. "Are you really the first president?" "Really?" Mavis forcefully nodded her head, as if to increase her persuasiveness, she uttered those words. "Although I am only a specter right now." Specter. Noah could only turn silent. He did not know what to say. Doubt her? But Noah was unable to say for sure that specters did not exist. Believe her? But her affinity with Noah was so high. She was not at all like the first president who left behind many legends. Furthermore, Noah still had many questions in his heart. Mixed together with the question of whether Mavis was truly the first-generation chairman, Noah didn't know which question to resolve first, causing him to sink into distress. Of course, Noah did have many questions in his heart, but Mavis did not. Thus, after looking at Noah for a while, Mavis tilted her head and smiled as she spoke. "I know, you are actually looking for this thing, right?" After saying that, Mavis extended her hand. In the next moment, a transparent crystal ball suddenly appeared in the empty sky and slowly fell into Mavis' hand. Dong! Almost at the same time when the transparent crystal ball appeared on the scene, Noah's heart suddenly thumped to a degree that could be clearly heard even if it wasn't pressed against his chest. The transparent crystal ball in Mavis' hand blossomed with a dazzling radiance. Within this dazzling radiance, regardless of whether it was Noah or Mavis, both of them could feel an emotion as if it was alive. Joy. Suspended within the transparent crystal ball was some kind of existence. Just like a human, it was emitting an emotion called joy. It was as if it had finally found its family after being lost for many years. The existence that was floating inside the transparent crystal ball-like crystal was the thing that Noah was most concerned about on this trip. A broken feather. Sure enough, this child is related to you. She could clearly feel the joy emitted from the broken feathers floating inside the transparent crystal ball, as well as the loud heartbeat coming from Noah's body. An indescribable radiance appeared on Mavis' adorable childlike face. It's no wonder that after you entered Heavenly Wolf Island, this child, who was always like an inanimate object, would suddenly become so fretful as if it was alive. Finding you was truly the right choice. Hearing this, Noah bitterly laughed. Clutching his heart, he resisted the feeling that was continuously surging within his body. That was also joy. Of course, Noah's heart was also surging with complex emotions at the same time. The appearance of the feather proved that the white dream that Noah had been living in since he was a child was very likely to be real. Furthermore, it was very likely that it was closely related to Noah's past, or the secret of his existence and birth. If that was the case, then that a feather in front of him was the key to unraveling Noah's mysterious past. Thinking of this, how could Noah's feelings not be complicated? After all, whether it was his body's constitution or that the feather that was emitting joy from meeting him, both were telling Noah that he was not ordinary. He really wasn't an ordinary person. Buzz buzz. The joy emitted by the feather in Mavis's hand began to change into fretful. Era. Mavis helplessly laughed. It seems that this child really wants to return to your side. Noah also had the same feeling, so he didn't refute Mavis's words. Instead, he forcefully suppressed the various doubts and emotions in his heart and extended his hand. First generation, can you give this to me? I originally called you here because I wanted to give this child to you. Mavis very straightforwardly handed over the item in her hand to Noah. Her appearance was just like a child presenting a treasure to an adult, asking for praise. It was exceptionally adorable. Ever since this child suddenly appeared in my tomb, the magic of Heavenly Wolf Island would occasionally be affected. Perhaps because of this, Heavenly Wolf Island has already been exposed to the outside world. This is truly distressing. So it turned out that the magic of Heavenly Wolf Island was disrupted due to the appearance of a feather, and was exposed to the outside world. With this, one of his doubts was finally resolved. Noah solemnly took the feather from Mavis's hand. Buzz. Once it landed in Noah's hand, the fretful emitted by the feather immediately turned into joy. Immediately after, like a baby returning to its cradle, it fell into a deep sleep. Thus, the resplendent strong light dissipated. At the scene, only Noah and Mavis were left. Hey, can you tell me? Mavis's pair of small wings that were slightly above her ears slightly shook twice. Then, Mavis approached with a face full of curiosity. What relationship do you have with this child? What relationship do I have with it? Noah looked at the feather that was quietly lying in his hand, his tone becoming complicated. Actually, I really want to know, is that so? Mavis seemed to have seen through the confusion in Noah's heart and smiled. No matter what, with such an unfathomable existence like you in the fairy tale, perhaps it will become even more interesting. Moreover, you are the grandson of the third generation and have a heart that is tightly linked to the fairy tale. I believe that one day, you will be able to find your own answer. Speaking to this point, Mavis suddenly seemed to be thinking about something very important. She crossed her arms like a mischievous child and appeared to be distressed. But after a while, she immediately tapped her palm. I've decided. After saying this, Mavis closed her eyes and 3 balls of light suddenly floated out from within her body and revolved around each other. In the next second, the 3 balls of light shot towards Noah's direction. Noah reflexively raised his hands and blocked in front of his body. However, the 3 balls of light ignored Noah's movements and directly merged into Noah's body. Noah only felt an explosion in his head. A memory that didn't belong to Noah entered his mind and was deeply engraved in the depths of Noah's soul. In a daze, Noah heard Mavis's dreamy voice that seemed to be getting further and further away. This is a gift for you. I hope that the inconceivable you can also bring inconceivable hope to the fairy tale. Chapter 73. Big Brother Noah. Big Brother Noah. Big Brother Noah. Just like in his dreams, Noah's familiar voice sounded with a hint of worry, waking him up. Big Brother Noah. As Noah slowly opened his eyes, the worry in her voice disappeared and was replaced with surprise. Noah saw her face full of surprise, causing Noah to wake up. Lisanna? Yes. Lisanna nodded heavily and let out a sigh of relief. That's great. Big Brother Noah, you're finally awake. I thought something happened to you. Seeing her expression of relief that couldn't be faked, Noah rubbed her head in shame. Sorry for making you worry. It's good that you're fine, she said with a shake of her head. Big Brother Noah, why did you suddenly seem to have lost consciousness? About that. Noah scratched his face and laughed bitterly. I don't know how to explain it all of a sudden. I'm not too sure myself, but if I'm not wrong, the firstborn pulled me into a place similar to a mental world. That's why I'm like that, right? Firstborn? She tilted her head in confusion. Upon seeing this, Noah didn't explain in detail. Instead, he continued to stroke her head while looking ahead. Over there, the tombstone of the first president of Fairy Tale was still as old as ever. The hole in the middle of the tombstone was still the same as before, as if it was filled with burning flames. Although there was no heat, there was still a warm glow coming from it. At first, Noah didn't know what the burning flame-like thing was, but now he knew. Anyone who knew about Mavis Viamilio and Fairy Tale would know that there were 3 world-famous magics in Fairy Tale. They were created by the first president of the Fairy Tale, Mavis Viamilio, and only the members of the Fairy Tale could use these 3 super spells. The so-called super magic referred to super magic that only had exceptionally strong magic power, and even had to meet certain conditions. It was a super magic that was much more powerful than ordinary magic, or even the lost magic that existed since the ancient times. It was a super magic with earth-shattering power. Magics like that were not only powerful, they were extremely rare. Even the 10 great Magi saints who represented the pinnacle of the magic world might not have them. It could be said that they were existences that every magus would covet. Within Fairy Tale, there were 3 such magics. However, ever since the firstborn president of Fairy Tale, Mavis Viamilio, passed away, only one of the 3 magics of Fairy Tale was passed down. It was in the hands of the past presidents of Fairy Tale. The other 2 magics were completely lost and became lost magics. Inside the burning flame on the tombstone that belonged to the first chairman of Fairy Tale, one of the 3 great spells of Fairy Tale was sealed within. If the Magi of the outside world were to know about this, it might lead to a war between the Magi on Celestial Wolf Island. After all, if one could really master a magic, even if they couldn't become a figure like the 10 great Magi saints, they could still occupy a place in the magic world. Even Noah couldn't help but be interested. Of course, that was in the past. Noah closed his eyes. At this moment, in Noah's mind, memories that didn't originally belong to him began to appear. There were 3 spells recorded in this memory. These were the 3 major spells of the fairy's tale. Now, these 3 magics, which even the president of Fairy Tale had only mastered one, were clearly engraved in Noah's mind. As long as Noah was willing, he could start learning these 3 world-famous magics at any time. Thus, one of the 3 magics of Fairy Tale sealed within the tombstone was no longer able to arouse Noah's interest. Phew. Noah lightly exhaled, opened his eyes, and spoke softly to the tombstone in front of him. What a precious gift, HM. Lysana blinked. Big brother Noah, what did you just say? Nothing. Noah tidied up his emotions, turned around, and walked outside. Let's go. Lysana. Go. Lysana hurriedly followed. Go where? Noah said without turning his head. Back to the guild. Huh. Lysana was even more baffled. Then, are we not going to deal with the mana disorder problem on Celestial Wolf Island? That's already been dealt with. Dealt with? Lysana angrily shouted as countless question marks popped up in her head. What the hell is going on? Explain it to me. In the midst of the commotion, Noah and Lysana gradually left the place. In front of the old tombstone, the fairy-like girl had appeared there at some point. She looked at Noah's gradually blurring figure from afar, and after a long time, she let out a tinkling laugh. Bless you, the young man who makes others feel incredible and unusually warm, what? In the Fairy Tale Guild, Makarov's frantic screams reverberated throughout the sky of Magnolia. Even the buildings in Fairy Tale seemed to be trembling. You said you saw President Mavis on Celestial Wolf Island? Standing in front of Makarov, Noah closed one of his eyes after being yelled at by him. Lysana couldn't help but cover her ears. Apart from Noah and Lysana, the other members of Fairy Tale widened their eyes in shock. Is this for real? Gray's mouth twitched. The first president's ghost is on Celestial Wolf Island? You're joking, right? Elusha said as she crossed her arms and muttered to herself. No, it's possible if it's Lysana, but Noah wouldn't make such a joke. Ghost? Naz also crossed his arms with a distressed expression. After a long while, he looked at Habi who was flying beside him. Hey, are ghosts tasty? Wow. Habi narrowed his eyes. This person is dumber than a cat, you. Two. Mira said with a look of hatred. Since you didn't bring me along. Are you two telling the truth? Makarov asked solemnly. You can't joke about this. Actually, I don't know if I should believe it myself. This is what Big Bro Noah told me. Lysana pointed at her face with her finger and acted as if she was recalling something. But, if it's true that we saw a girl on Celestial Wolf Island, then I saw her too. But, I don't know if it's the first president. This. Makarov was confused for a moment before he looked at Noah. Then, what did President Mavis say to you? Noah glanced at everyone around him. When he realized that everyone was staring at him, he lowered his head. The look in his eyes became indiscernible and undetectable. Should he tell everyone in the guild the truth? While this thought flashed through his mind, Noah's mind was also running at an extremely fast speed. Until a certain moment, Noah made a decision. Actually. Noah looked at Makarov and said. The first president asked me to stay on Celestial Wolf Island temporarily and learn magic from her. Chapter 74. It was nighttime. Lying on his bed, Noah stared at the ceiling not too far away from him. Thousands of thoughts flashed through his mind. Reaching out his hand, he touched his chest. Noah could feel that his heart was beating at an intense frequency. This was a feeling that only Noah knew. Why would his heart beat in such a way? Noah had no idea. However, Noah had a feeling in his heart that something was calling out to him. Noah's intuition told him. If he answered this call, then he would leave the fairy's tale. This feeling started when Noah obtained the feather from Mavis. Since it was related to obtaining the feather, then, even if this feeling was extremely mysterious, the possibility of it becoming reality was extremely high. Sigh. Noah sighed faintly. Actually, in the beginning, Noah didn't want to respond to this call at all. Noah didn't want to leave the fairy tale at all. This was Noah's home. Everything about Noah started from the fairy tale guild. Based on the current situation, the feather was extremely likely to be related to Noah's origin, existence, and birth. After obtaining the feather, he felt as if he had to return to a certain place. If Noah really responded to it, then unraveling the secret of Noah's origin, existence, and birth shouldn't be impossible. However, if he had to leave the fairy tale as the price, then Noah would rather give up. This was Noah's original thought. As for the reason why Noah changed his mind, it was because he suddenly remembered Mavis's words. There is a heart that is tightly linked to the fairy tale. Noah clutched his chest, feeling the unnatural movement there. He closed his eyes and fell into deep thought. Then, no matter how far away I am, will I always return here? This was a completely baseless feeling. However, wasn't the feeling that made Noah leave the fairy tale also completely baseless? Since these were both baseless feelings, if he could believe the former, why couldn't he believe the latter? With that thought in mind, Noah's heart surprisingly calmed down. Even the throbbing in his chest began to subside. Noah had already decided. No matter what, he had to try first. Otherwise, this might become something that Noah would never be able to let go of for the rest of his life. In order to not let Makarov and the people around him worry, Noah said those words during the day. To go to the Sky Wolf Island and learn magic from the first President Mavis. In this way, everyone would not have to worry needlessly. In fact, it was just as Noah had thought. Makarov knew that the first president of the fairy tale would personally teach Noah magic. He was so excited that he howled continuously. However, he did not object and allowed Noah to make his own decision. Elusha, Gray, Naz and the others knew that Noah, who had just returned, was going to leave for a period of time because of his training. They made a lot of noise, but in the end, they did not stop Noah and expressed their support. Only Lisanna, after Noah mentioned that he would be going to the Sky Wolf Island for a period of time, kept her head down and did not say a word. There was no need to talk about Mira. She glared at Noah with a murderous look, as if she had a deep grudge against him. In the end, although they made a lot of noise, Noah's decision to leave tomorrow and stay at the Sky Wolf Island was something that the entire fairy tale guild knew about. And Noah had already made up his mind. Tomorrow, he would try to respond to that strange feeling. But, what happened to Lisanna? Noah could not help but mutter this sentence. In the next moment, he heard the sound of his room door being opened. At that moment, Noah hurriedly got up. There were many people who would come to Noah's room. But there was only one person who would not knock and just directly enter. Lisanna. Brother Noah. Lisanna walked in with a gentle smile on her face. You're not asleep yet? Not yet. Noah sat on the edge of the bed and looked straight at Lisanna. Seeing that there was nothing wrong with her, he heaved a sigh of relief and smiled in response. What about you? Why are you here so late? I wanted to chat with you. Lisanna walked directly to Noah's side and sat down. However, her eyes were fixed on Noah and fixed on Noah. Seeing Lisanna like this, Noah sighed inwardly. Sure enough, there was something wrong with the situation. I'm sorry. Noah raised his head and shifted his gaze to the ceiling as before. He did not look at Lisanna and spoke as if he was minding his own business. I know my decision is very willful, but, before Noah could finish, his mouth was covered by a finger. Brother Noah is not willful. Ever since we were young, you've been the most rational person around us. Lisanna looked into Noah's eyes. Brother Noah must have his own reasons for making such a decision. I know. You know. For the first time, Noah didn't avoid Lisanna's aggressive gaze and bravely looked back at her. But you're still unwilling to do so, aren't you? This time, Lysana was the first to look away. Her voice was a little dispirited. I'm just a little reluctant. Brother Noah has already left for 4 years, and now you're leaving again. Undoubtedly, we've always been together since we were young, Lysana. Noah couldn't help but hold Lysana's hand, which surprised her. Back on Celestial Wolf Island, President Mavis told me that I have a heart that's tightly linked to fairy tale. Noah channeled all his emotions into his words, attempting to express them through words. Fairy's tale will always be my home, my home. No matter how far I go, I will always come back. Then, how long will you be gone this time? Lysana finally could not help but ask the question she was most concerned about. Another 4 years? Noah could hear the reluctance in her voice. For a moment, Noah even considered giving up on his decision and staying in Fairy Tale. After all, to be honest, Noah himself did not know when he would return. However, if he really did that, Noah's perception of himself would remain at the level of a different monster from others for the rest of his life. Was that really okay? At the same time as he asked himself, Noah closed his eyes. After a while, he suddenly opened them. 3 years. Lysana was stunned. 3 years? Yes. Noah nodded heavily, his tone incomparably firm. No matter what, I'll definitely return in 3 years at most. This sentence was still without any basis. However, at this moment, Noah had already decided that no matter what, he would definitely return to Fairy Tale within 3 years at most. Even if the situation did not allow it, Noah would still think of a way to return. Even if he died, he would return. This was Noah's determination. Perhaps she saw something from Noah's attitude. Lysana finally smiled sweetly, held Noah's hand, closed her eyes, and leaned her head on Noah's shoulder. Noah's heart was also deeply touched. Leaning on Lysana's head, he also closed his eyes and did not speak, allowing time to pass. Noah and Lysana, who were immersed in tenderness, did not notice. Outside the door, a figure left a trail of white ponytail in the air and quietly left. Chapter 75. The sun gradually chased away the darkness of the night and illuminated the entirety of Villa Magnolia. It also illuminated the fairy tale that seemed to always be in the center of the town, causing the signboard to shine brightly. At this moment, she was arranging the clothes she had taken out from the wardrobe and stuffing everything she had brought into Noah's luggage. What's missing? Noah, who had put his magic sword into a cloth bag, looked at Lysana with a helpless expression. I say, Lysana, I'm only going on a long trip, not to seek refuge. There's no need to pack all my clothes and stuff into my luggage, right? What are you talking about? Lysana spat out her dissatisfied words without even turning her head. Big brother Noah, you're going to Celestial Wolf Island this time, not near Magnolia. You can find food on the island, but will you be able to find clothes on the island? Still, there's no need to bring so much, right? Noah looked at the luggage that was almost bigger than his bed and rolled his eyes. Can't I just bring 1 or 2 pieces of clothing and 1 or 2 other things? Then what if you can't find them when you need them? There's always a way. I'm going to an island, not a desert. Do you think I'll die of thirst or starvation? But, seeing that she was still unwilling, Noah decided to cut the Gordian knot. No matter what, it'll be a burden for me to bring too many things. I'm not a Lusha, I don't have to bring a carriage full of luggage with me every time I go on a mission. Then, under Lysana's regretful gaze, Noah took out the things he didn't need and the things he prepared too well. He only stopped when his luggage was reduced to the size of a parcel. He hung it on the cloth bag that contained the knight's sword and slung it over his shoulder. That'll do. All right. Lysana still didn't seem to feel at ease. Noah couldn't help but stroke her soft hair lovingly. Even though I'm going far this time, I have experience living in the wilderness, mountains, and forests. I won't starve to death anywhere. Only then did her expression look much better and she nodded reluctantly. Noah walked down the stairs with her. When he appeared in front of everyone in the guild, the noisy guild instantly quieted down. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Noah. Some were filled with blessings. Some were filled with smiles. Some were filled with reluctance. Some were filled with understanding. Noah's heart couldn't help but calm down. Elisha, Naz, Gray, Kana, Elfman, and even Leah, who was in the corner, quietly looked at Noah, not intending to say anything. There was a complicated look in Myra's eyes for a moment. After a while, she snorted coldly and turned her head away with a look of indifference. Makarov walked up to Noah and looked up at Noah. "Are you ready?" Noah didn't answer. Instead, he nodded, causing Makarov to sigh. "You're a smart child. You've been very sensible since you were young. You know how to work hard and take care of yourself. You also have experience cultivating outside. I'm not worried about whether you'll be able to live a better life." Speaking of this, Makarov smiled benevolently. "But if you miss home, you can come back at any time. Understand?" Noah suppressed the surging emotions in his heart, but he couldn't help but put on a smile on his face. "I understand, Grandpa. Celestial Wolf Island is our sacred land. Since you plan to live there, you have the duty to protect it," Makarov said seriously. The strength of the first chairman, Mavis Viamilio, when she was alive was almost unseen. She also possessed extraordinary wisdom and knowledge. She was familiar with almost all kinds of magic. Since the first chairman intends to personally teach you magic, you have to learn it seriously, Makarov said with some expectation. With your talent and the powerful magic that you were born with, perhaps you might have the opportunity to learn the 3 great spells that President Mavis created when she was still alive. Fairy tale. That's hard to say. Hearing this, the members of the guild were also looking forward to it. They obviously wanted to see the 3 great magic spells of the fairy tale. Noah couldn't help but apologize to everyone in his heart. After all, Noah didn't really intend to let Mavis teach him magic. However, Makarov and the others' expectations weren't disappointed. Although Noah said that Mavis would personally teach him magic, it was just a white lie that he didn't want others to worry about him. However, this lie wasn't completely made up. At the very least, the 3 great magic spells of the fairy tale that Mavis created were indeed lying in Noah's mind, waiting for him to learn and control them. Thus, Noah looked around at everyone present and nodded solemnly. "I won't disappoint everyone." Hearing this, everyone in the guild gave Noah their blessings. "Take good care of yourself, Noah. Don't forget to bring back some specialties when you come back." "Yes, yes, yes. If there's anything good on Celestial Wolf Island, don't forget to bring it back for us to enjoy." The kind words of farewell made Noah feel rather emotional, but he still responded to them one by one. However, not everyone's farewell was so heartwarming. "Noah." Naz jumped out from the crowd and raised a fist. "Let's have a showdown." Naz. Habi sighed helplessly. "Naz." Lisanna said angrily. "Why are you still like this at a time like this?" "Idiot." Gray said teasingly. "Only a guy like you, whose head is filled with fire, would keep making things difficult for himself." Gray's voice became softer and softer as he spoke. There was no other reason. At this moment, Naz was no longer as hot-blooded and impulsive as before, shouting, "Let's have a showdown," and rushing over immediately. At this moment, there was only a serious expression on Naz's face that didn't match him at all. Noah also looked straight at Naz, whose face was full of seriousness, and spoke after a while. "Naz, are you serious? Ever since I came to Fairy's Tale and lost to you, I've always wanted to challenge you again. For this, I've worked very hard for the past 4 years." Naz grinned. "You're going to leave again now. When you come back, you'll definitely become stronger, but I can't wait." "Noah." The raised fist was burning with flames that made the air in the entire guild hot, and Naz's expression became as ferocious as a beast's. "You can leave, but you have to have a showdown with me first." The whole place was silent. Feeling the scorching temperature rising from Nazi's body and the ferocious magic power that was like real flames, Noah closed his eyes and then suddenly opened them. "I understand, I accept your challenge." Naz smiled, and his smile was unusually hot-blooded. I'm burning. Fairy's tale, in front of the guild's main entrance. Thinking about it carefully, the last time the two of us fought under such circumstances was 4 years ago. Noah took off the luggage hanging on the cloth bag containing the magic knight's sword and threw it aside. He looked at Naz opposite him, and the corners of his mouth slowly rose. 4 years ago, I fought with you and killed us here. In the blink of an eye, 4 years have passed. I'm not the same as 4 years ago. Naz was like a cheetah that was about to pounce forward. He lowered his body and stared at Noah. This time, I'll definitely defeat you. The smile on Noah's face gradually widened, and one of his hands held the bag that contained the magic knight's sword tightly. Then let me see it. Chapter 76. The battle began abruptly in an atmosphere that was on the verge of breaking out. Boom! With an explosive sound, Nazi lowered his body like a cheetah. Scorching flames rose from his body and wrapped around Nazi's body. Nazi opened his mouth without warning, and the flames around his body flowed into his mouth like a stream of air. Fire dragons. In the next moment, Naz opened his mouth in Noah's direction. Roar! A blast of flames shot out of Naz's mouth. It grew bigger and bigger as it charged. With extreme heat, it evaporated the atmosphere and shattered the earth. It blew towards Noah's direction amidst the dust and turbulence. Noah's vision was filled with flames and his cheeks were getting warmer because of the approaching flames. However, he was still as calm as ever with a smile on his face. Without any intention of dodging or using magic, Noah grabbed the cloth bag that held the magic knight's sword and held the hilt of the magic knight's sword in the bag. He held the bag horizontally in front of him until the raging flames blew in front of him. Then, he swung it to the side. Whoosh! As if a gust of wind suddenly appeared in front of Noah, the scorching flames were disrupted by an invisible force when Noah swung the cloth bag that held the magic knight's sword. They scattered into sparks that filled the sky. Seeing this scene, everyone present sucked in a breath of cold air. He didn't use magic, didn't unsheath the sword, and didn't even open the cloth bag that held the magic knight's sword. With just a wave of his hand, Naz's powerful flame breath was disintegrated. As expected. Elisha and Mira stared at Noah, who was full of smiles. He's already stronger than us, big brother Noah. Lisanna seemed to be a little excited, as if she was the one who was standing in the middle of the battlefield. What's wrong? Noah put down the cloth bag in his hand and looked straight at Naz, who was opposite him. If that's all you got, you can't beat me, Naz. I'm just greeting you first. Not only was Naz not discouraged, he even smiled excitedly. Now, it's time for the main show. After saying that, a majestic mana surged out from Naz's body, causing the flames around him to burn even more fiercely and hotter than before. And the strength of this mana was far beyond that of an ordinary magic shooter. Even many of the veteran magic shooters in the guild could not compare to him. The sudden appearance of such a powerful demonic energy directly caused the nearby crowd to become quiet. Numerous bewildered gazes were immediately shot over and paused on Naz. Their expressions had also become somewhat interesting. This Naz is already so strong? Looking at Naz, whose cherry-colored hair was fluttering in the dense flames, whether it was the veteran magic shooters in the guild or Naz's childhood playmates, they were all shocked. Although Naz was always clamoring to duel with someone, almost no one had seen Naz's full strength in these years, not even Gray, who played with him every day. Therefore, at this time, no one in the great fairy tale knew that Naz had unknowingly become so strong. Apart from those S-rank magic shooters, there shouldn't be more than 5 people in the entire fairy tale who could compare to Naz. This guy, even we didn't know that he had reached such a level. Mira and Elisha looked at each other and couldn't help but smile. Tisk, Gray smacked his lips, but his line of sight was fixed on Naz. Obviously, this guy, who could definitely be called a sworn enemy with Naz, was competitive because of Naz's strength. How is it? In the center of the field, Naz, who was surrounded by surging flames, smiled proudly. I've become stronger, right? Indeed, you've become stronger. I believe that there are not many people in the guild who can beat you, Naz. Noah looked straight at Naz and suddenly smiled. But, if it's only to this extent, before he finished his words, Noah's figure suddenly trembled. Looking at Noah, who stopped in front of him without moving, Naz's expression suddenly changed. The flames around him suddenly shook, and like a propeller, it made Naz's figure glide backward. The moment Naz retreated, a black shadow suddenly appeared. The long cloth bag carried a terrifying oppressive wind and sharp air-tearing sound as it fiercely slashed at Naz's original position, brushing past Naz's face. At this moment, Noah's figure on the opposite side began to dissipate. He held the cloth bag and appeared at the side of Naz's original position. An afterimage? In the crowd, Mira and Alusha's eyes narrowed at the same time. So fast. Lisanna and the others covered their mouths in astonishment. Fire dragons. Naz, who dodged Noah's attack, stopped retreating, leaped forward, extended his arm, and clenched his fist. The flames on his body instantly gathered on his fist, bringing along a scorching wind as he smashed his fist toward Noah's chest. Iron Fist. The fiery wind pounced and mercilessly hit Noah's face, making Noah's face gradually become hotter and hotter. However, in the face of Naz's violent attack, Noah's expression remained unchanged. He bent his wrist slightly and the long cloth bag in his hands suddenly flew out and blocked in front of Noah like a shield. Bang! In the muffled sound, Naz's violent punch hit the cloth bag, stirring up dense sparks and wind waves. However, it didn't even burn a layer of skin on the cloth bag. The reason was simple. Noah had already covered the entire cloth bag with his mana. Unless Naz had the ability to disperse the mana that Noah covered the cloth bag, Naz, a dignified dragon slayer archmage, couldn't even destroy the cloth bag that Noah used to store the magic knight sword. Naz's brain wasn't very bright, but when it came to battle, his brain would turn and he naturally understood what was going on. At that moment, Naz let out a dragon-like roar. It's not over yet. The moment the roar fell, Naz crazily waved his fists burning with flames. Scorching hot fists like a storm poured towards Noah's body. Red Lotus Fire Dragon Fists. The fiery fist, which was like a jet of fire, shrouded Noah's body in an overwhelming manner. It was mixed with a blazing wind, wrapping every part of Noah's body. There was no trace of mercy at all. Naz's violent and ferocious offensive made Noah raise his eyebrows. A trace of sharpness emerged in his eyes. He slightly lifted his foot and took a step forward, his body nimbly dodging left and right. Chi 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 chi. Naz's storm-like red lotus fire dragon fists actually brushed past Noah's body and landed in the air. They were all dodged by Noah. Occasionally, Noah would wave the cloth bag in his hand to resist some of the flames. The sparks that erupted illuminated Noah's young face. Thus, in the flames that filled the sky, one could clearly see if one observed carefully. Noah's line of sight was tightly fixed on one of the fire beams that covered the sky. Suddenly, Noah's figure stopped and no longer dodged. His eyes shone brightly. The cloth bag in his hand was like a heavy sword, directly thrusting out and hitting one of the fire beams that filled the sky. A muffled sound slowly sounded. The fire beams that filled the sky also abruptly dissipated. Only Naz's stagnant fist and the cloth bag heavily collided, stirring up a strong wind. Chapter 77. Wah! A shockwave spread out from the battlefield and blew onto the surrounding fairy tale players, causing quite a few of them to cry out in surprise. Ha! Feeling the fierce force from Naz's fist, Noah let out a low growl. Vigorous magic power burst out from his body and poured into Noah's arm along his body. With the support of such vigorous magic power, Noah's arm seemed to have become slightly thicker than before. Under such circumstances, Noah suddenly shook his arm and an explosive force surged out from his arm and rushed into the cloth bag. Finally, it rudely went along the cloth bag and hit Naz's fist that collided with the tip of the cloth bag. Bang! A sudden burst of power came crashing down, causing a loud clashing sound to ring out. Then, the scorching flames covering Naz's fist were completely dispersed by this impact, causing Naz to be shocked. Pa! On the other hand, Noah didn't hesitate at all. Taking advantage of Naz's surprise, he heavily slapped the cloth bag. Whoosh! The cloth bag wrapped in vigorous magic power was like an arrow that left the bow and shot toward Naz, who was close at hand. Shooting at such a close distance, even with Naz's reaction, he almost couldn't react in time. When he finally reacted with great difficulty, the tip of the cloth bag containing the magic knight's sword, which was the tip of the magic knight's sword in the cloth bag, had been imprinted in Naz's eyes and gradually enlarged. Damn it! Naz roared again. He turned his body sideways and turned his body upside down in the air. He stretched out a foot with his head down and feet up. Naz's foot immediately burned with a scorching flame. Fire Dragon's hook claw. The foot burning with flames fiercely kicked the cloth bag that was shooting toward him. Clang! A crisp sound of steel clashing resounded through the sky. Naz's figure and the cloth bag that was shooting toward Naz flew out almost at the same time. Pa! Noah directly stretched out his hand and caught the cloth bag that was flying back. Goo! Naz fell to the ground with his back in a somewhat embarrassing state. After smashing heavily on the ground, he bounced up and knelt on one knee with one hand pressing on the ground. He finally stabilized his body. It was clear at a glance who had the upper hand in this duel. Moreover, Naz had already used all his skills and his magic power was almost squandered in a wasteful way. He attacked crazily and displayed 120% of his strength. As for Noah, not to mention magic, even his usual weapon had been kept in the cloth bag. He didn't display his impressive swordsmanship. He only used magic power to strengthen the toughness of the cloth bag throughout the whole process. He was unilaterally dealing with Naz's attacks and hadn't even started to exert his strength. As a result, Naz displayed 120% of his strength, but Noah didn't even know if he used 1/10 of his strength. Naz still ended the duel at a disadvantage. Was there any suspense in this duel? So strong. No matter how stupid Naz was, it was impossible for him not to realize how big the gap between him and Noah was. He clenched his fists, his eyes and expression were shaking, and his body was trembling. Seeing this, the people of Fairy Tale were amazed at Noah's outstanding strength, and at the same time, they looked at Naz with pity. Naz. Habi had tears in the corners of his eyes and looked like he was about to cry. It seemed that he couldn't bear to watch anymore. Mira, Alusha, Lisanna, Gray, and the others quietly watched the development of everything in silence. Makarov, who had been watching the entire duel silently, glanced at the calm Noah and then at the wavering Naz, and a gratified look appeared in his eyes. Naz, you should thank Noah for creating the motivation for you to become stronger before leaving. In the middle of the field, Noah looked at Naz, who was clenching his fists, trembling all over, and his eyes gradually became serious. Naz. The extremely abrupt call startled the trembling Naz and he looked over blankly. Become stronger. Facing Naz's sluggish gaze, Noah indifferently opened his mouth and said such a sentence. Then, come and challenge me. Hearing this, Naz's eyes trembled, but the trembling of his body inconceivably stopped. His expression gradually recovered, and he revealed a big smile. You're really strong. Naz lowered his hands and stared at Noah with a burning gaze. Next time, let's have another duel. Noah closed his eyes, but the smile on his face could not be concealed. It was not until this time that the people of Fairy Tale realized what had happened. It was obvious. Naz had admitted defeat. This duel. Makarov announced on the spot. The winner Noah. Oh 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 oh. All the magic shooters of Fairy Tale cheered, and they were not stingy with their cheers for this wonderful duel. Naz. Habi flew directly into Naz's arms, and his face was full of worry. Are you okay? Ah. Naz nodded heavily, hugged Habi, and looked at Noah, who was in the middle of the crowd, with a strong fighting spirit blooming in his eyes. Hey, Habi. N? Habi raised his head and looked at Naz in a daze. I want to be strong. Naz made such a declaration in a firm and hearty voice. Become stronger than anyone else. Love. Habi cried out loudly. If it's Naz, it's definitely not a problem. Is that so? Naz laughed out loud. Not far away, Noah, who was in the middle of the crowd, looked in the direction of Naz, and his heart was more or less surging. Although Naz was not as strong as Mira and Alusha, and was not comparable to Lax's, but after the battle with Naz, Noah had such an incredible feeling in his heart. If there was someone in the crowd of Fairy Tale who could surpass Noah in the future and catch up with Noah's footsteps, then this person, in all likelihood, was Naz. From Naz, Noah saw almost infinite possibilities. So, Noah deeply believed in this. Just as the crowd of Fairy Tale cheered because of the end of the battle between Noah and Naz, on a high point not far from Fairy Tale, several figures were standing there. Looking down at Noah, who was surrounded by Fairy Tale people, Lax's expression did not change at all. However, Freed, Bikesro, and Albarglin, who were standing beside Lax's, could clearly see that Lax's hand, which was crossed in front of his chest, was tightly grasping his arm, almost scratching his skin. That Noah. Freed looked at Noah with a serious gaze. He didn't use magic, nor did he use any weapons, nor did he take the initiative to attack. He just dealt with it passively, yet he was able to suppress Naz. Speaking of which, Naz's strength has also improved a lot. Bikesro seemed to be in disbelief. Looking at his current strength, even if our Thor Council made a move, it is very likely that we can't beat him in a one-on-one fight. I have no interest in Naz. Albarglin said directly. I want to know what Noah's true strength is more. As soon as these words came out, Lax's immediately turned around and walked in another direction without looking back. Lax's. The three people of Thor Council all let out anxious voices and chased after him. Lax's, who did not care about Thor Council, had a ruthless look in his eyes as he left such a sentence. When you come back, I will prove that I am the strongest one. Chapter 78. At the port of Magnolia, a ship was anchored there. The captain was letting the workers unload the cargo from the ship while glancing to the side from time to time, as if waiting for something. In the captain's line of sight, the magic shooters of Fairy Tale were gathered here. Their gazes were focused on Noah, and they did not speak for a long time. Noah was the same. His gaze swept over his companions again and again until the captain of the ship not far away cast an urging gaze at him. He took a deep breath and nodded to everyone. Everyone, let's part here. Brother Noah. Lisanna was the first to call out to Noah, her face full of reluctance. Remember to take good care of yourself. Don't worry. Noah stepped forward and patted Lisanna's little head. This is not the first time I've left Fairy Tale for training. You don't have to worry too much. That's true, Alusha said as if she was joking. With Noah's strength, even if he encounters a shipwreck, he will be able to survive. We don't have to worry about him at all. Well, although I'm not very familiar with Celestial Wolf Island, since the first president is there, even a ghost can take care of Noah, right? Gray was dressed neatly, which was rare for him. He smiled at Noah. Don't let the people who have passed away worry about you. Let's fight again next time. Naz clenched his fists and grinned. Next time, I will definitely not lose again. Love. Harpy called out energetically. Then, he reluctantly took out a fish from his backpack. He was drooling while holding back his tears. With trembling cat paws, he handed the fish to Noah. I'll give you my most precious treasure. Boo-hoo-hoo. I'll accept your kindness. Noah said, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Since it's so precious, keep it well. Don't waste it. Love. Like acting in a play, Harpy rapidly took back the fish. His funny performance dispersed a lot of the sadness before the departure, causing many people to reveal smiles. Bon voyage. Karna, Lebby, and the others only said this one sentence and didn't say anything else. Everything was understood without words. Noah nodded in response. Then, he paused for a moment and turned to look at Lysana's side. There, Mira was still wearing her revealing and sexy clothes. Her white ponytail was casually hanging behind her back. She crossed her arms and didn't say a single word. Humph. Seeing that Noah was looking at him, Mira dodged his gaze for a moment. Then, he snorted and turned his head away, looking like he had no intention of saying anything. Seeing this, Noah shrugged and said mockingly, "I hope you'll become gentler when I come back. Do you want to fight?" Mira blushed and glared at Noah. Her face was full of murderous intent, but the words that came out of her mouth were like that. "Will you come back if I become gentler?" Noah raised his eyebrows. After seriously considering it for a while, he said with a bit of amusement, "That's not impossible. When you become gentler, it'll be about time for me to come back." Myra's expression froze and she fell silent. Nobody saw that Myra's beautiful eyes flashed with undetectable thought as she lowered her head. She muttered softly in a voice that only she could hear, "I'll come back if I become gentler." Elfman. Noah raised his head and looked at Elfman, who was taller than him. "I hope that when I come back, you can become a little more manly and not be bullied by Mira. You have to learn how to protect your family, understand?" "Protect my family." Elfman was stunned at first, then looked at Mira and Lysana with a look of determination in his eyes. "I want to become a man. Protect my family. That's the way." Noah patted Elfman's shoulder and finally looked at Makarov. "Be careful." That simple and comprehensive sentence expressed all the emotions in Makarov's heart. "I know." Noah took a step back and glanced at all of his fairy tale companions again. "Then, everyone, I'll take my leave first. See you in the near future." After saying that, Noah didn't hesitate any longer. He directly boarded the ship that had finished moving the goods while the captain's expression softened. "Goodbye. Goodbye. Noah. Brother Noah. Come back soon. Train hard. Don't let the first generation look down on you. We're looking forward to the 3 major spells of fairy tale. Don't let us down." At the port, below the ship, the members of Fairy Tale waved at Noah one after another, causing a warm feeling to surge in Noah's heart as he turned his back. Under such circumstances, the ship slowly set sail and sailed towards the boundless ocean. On the deck, Noah, whose back was facing the port, only had one thought left in his mind. He hoped that he would not cry when he left. Noah. Just as Noah was thinking this, a loud call came from the port that was already very far away. Noah could not help but turn around and look in the direction of the port. In the next moment, Noah's body trembled and a dazed expression appeared in his eyes for the first time. "Who?" In an extremely orderly movement, the members of Fairy Tale standing at the port of Magnolia, led by Makarov, straightened one of their hands, stretched out their thumb and index finger, and pointed to the sky with an inverted 7 sign. That was a gesture that only those who were familiar with the fairy's tale or those who were familiar with the fairy's tale would know. This was the meaning behind the gesture that was unique to the fairy tale. Noah's hand was already tightly grasping the edge of the ship. His body leaned forward as if to see his family. His hand that was holding the edge of the ship was trembling and his expression was violently moved. All the emotions in his heart finally could not be controlled and all gushed out. Noah could only close his eyes and try his best to adjust his emotions. One of his hands was raised high above his head and made the same gesture as the members of Fairy Tale, pointing to the sky. At this moment, Noah's heart was incomparably convinced of a fact. Only Fairy's Tale was his home. He would definitely come back again. Heavenly Wolf Island. Carrying the cloth bag with his luggage, Noah disembarked from the ship and once again boarded the sacred land of Fairy Tale. After 2 days, Noah once again came to Heavenly Wolf Island. He could clearly feel that Heavenly Wolf Island was slightly different from the first time he came here. This slight difference was that the magic that filled the ground of Heavenly Wolf Island was no longer chaotic like last time. Instead, it flowed in an orderly manner and gathered in the direction of the heavenly wolf tree. Looking at the huge heavenly wolf tree not far away, Noah closed his eyes and covered his chest with his hand. Dong dong. Almost at the same time, Noah's heart strangely stirred. The calling that he could always feel also became stronger. Noah did not hesitate. As if he wanted to grasp this feeling, Noah's chest tightened. Whang! Without warning, the space around Noah began to distort, enveloping Noah's body and swallowing Noah's figure. Then, Noah disappeared from where he stood. Chapter 79. Even with his eyes closed, Noah could clearly feel it. In front of his eyes, there was a white that was enough to penetrate his eyelids and enter his vision. His brain seemed to have entered a state of confusion, and could not operate in time. His body seemed to have entered the world of water, and there was no sense of direction. Noah could only use his consciousness to barely understand that he seemed to be in a state of weightlessness. His body was spinning and floating back and forth uncontrollably, as if he was floating up and down with the waves. It was very strange. Noah himself did not know how long this feeling lasted. Perhaps, his confused brain was no longer able to distinguish the concept of time, and let Noah maintain this state until he grew old, or until he died. That might be the case. Therefore, when the familiar feeling of being on the ground was transmitted to Noah's confused brain through his feet, it made Noah's confused brain shake. When he gradually came to his senses, Noah actually had a faint sense of happiness and satisfaction to be able to be on the ground. Immediately, Noah opened his eyes. The first thing that entered Noah's eyes was a white that was enough to hurt people's eyes. Noah could not help but raise a hand in front of him, squinting his eyes slightly. After adapting to the strong white light, he raised his head and looked ahead. Unfortunately, there was nothing in front of Noah. There were no objects. There was no environment. There was no sky. There was no earth. Even the boundary line did not enter Noah's vision. This was a world with nothing. Except for a white that was enough to hurt people's eyes, there was nothing here. Noah seemed to be floating in the air, but he felt as though he was standing on solid ground. It was as though he was standing on an invisible ground. Everything in his field of vision was white. Except for the white, there was nothing. However, it was such an empty world that made Noah's body tremble, as if he had fallen into soft cotton. It was like a baby returning to his mother's body, and he felt very comfortable. This feeling made Noah's eyes widen. Because, this was a feeling that only appeared when he entered the white dream in the past. At that moment, Noah's remaining blurred consciousness was completely awakened, allowing Noah to realize what was going on. He wasn't really in a dream. This place was still the place that Noah had seen in his dreams more than once. However, this time, this place gave Noah a sense of reality, without the illusory feeling of a dream. Noah could understand what was happening in an instant. The fact that the white dream was real. Now, Noah finally came to the dream that could be said to have accompanied him for his whole life. Since this is the case, Noah slightly clenched his fists, and raised his head, to look at the direction where the sky should have been. Thus, Noah saw feathers falling to the ground to be floating in the bubble, the feathers that fell from the sky, enveloped by a white halo and suspended in a bubble, the feathers that fell from the sky, ding 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 ding. It was as if they were welcoming Noah. Pieces of feathers emitted dazzling halos as they came to Noah's side. Like little birds, they cheerfully circled Noah and began to circle around him. Bursts of intense light surged from the feathers. Bathed in the light, Noah felt an emotion called joy. The scene was exactly the same as when Noah obtained the feather on Sirius Island. The difference was that the feathers that were circling around him were not only much brighter than the feathers that Noah received, but the emotions contained within them were also much more intense. In addition, the feathers in front of him were complete. The feathers that Noah received, however, were incomplete. Wait. Noah suddenly woke up. Incomplete? If he didn't remember incorrectly, Noah remembered that in the white dream, other than these perfect feathers, there were also many incomplete feathers. It was unknown whether or not they knew what Noah was thinking, but the feathers that were circling around Noah suddenly dispersed. Following which, in the vast expanse of white sky, more and more feathers fell from the sky. They were incomplete and dull. Compared to the feathers from before, they looked as if they had lost their lives. This incomplete and dim feather also circled around Noah's body. As it spun, it emitted an extremely dim radiance compared to the previous feather. From these lights, Noah could only feel one emotion: sorrow. It was like a child who was crying to his family after being hurt. Noah couldn't help but reach out his hand and pick up one of the incomplete feathers. His eyes slightly shook, and he couldn't help but say this: "How can I help you?" Almost at the same time Noah's voice fell, Noah's body blossomed with the same light. A similarly incomplete feather floated out from his body and arrived in front of Noah. The incomplete feathers that were circling around Noah's body all trembled as if they were excited. Then, one by one, they began to circle around the feather that flew out from Noah's body. Not long after, one of the feathers seemed to tremble in joy. Together with the other feather that was also trembling, they slowly approached each other. Ding! In the next second, the two equally damaged pieces of the feather actually perfectly fit together. With a strange sound, they were restored to their perfect state. The recovered feathers blossomed with a strong light that absolutely couldn't be compared to before. They released emotions called excitement, gratitude, excitement, ecstasy, and other emotions to Noah. They flew to Noah's cheeks in an extremely human-like manner and rubbed against Noah's cheeks. Inconceivably, Noah's heart was filled with gratification and joy. It was as if he had a heart-to-heart with the feathers. He stroked the feather that was rubbing against his face and said as if he understood: "I understand. As long as I can find your incomplete parts, you can return to your original state, right?" Wang wang wang. Around them, the incomplete feathers began to tremble one by one, echoing Noah's words. But Noah furrowed his brows. "Where should I go to find your missing parts?" The feather that was rubbing against Noah's cheeks suddenly flew in front of Noah and immediately hit Noah's head. In the next moment, from the feather, fragments of memories flowed into Noah's mind, allowing Noah to obtain a fact that almost made him cry out involuntarily. "You are all worlds?" Yes. These complete feathers, before his eyes, were all complete worlds. Except for the world where the fairy's tale was, the rest were all worlds. In other words, the world of the fairy's tale that Noah was originally in was within these feathers in front of him. And now, Noah had already left the world of the fairy's tale and arrived at another strange place. Between worlds. It was a special space where all the worlds were. As for those incomplete feathers, they were each a fragmented world. The other parts of them were lost in those complete worlds. If Noah wanted these feathers to return to their original state, then he would have to enter each and every world and find the remaining parts of the incomplete worlds. He would have to go and save each and every world. Noah's head was a little dizzy. However, a sadness that continued to be released from the surrounding feathers touched Noah's heart, and his expression became gloomy. Finally, Noah let out a deep sigh. The other worlds. Chapter 80. The sky was gray. The ground was red. The forest was decaying. The buildings were decaying. The wind carried a variety of pungent smells. The air was filled with an atmosphere that made one's heart palpitate. Vaguely, a roar that sounded like the roar of a tiger or the howl of a wolf reverberated in the surroundings, reverberating in every corner that could be touched. It gave people a feeling that they were not willing to have in their entire lives. Despair. Looking around at this world that seemed to have completely fallen into hell, Noah, who was standing in the middle of the ground that seemed to be dyed red with blood, couldn't help but deeply frown. What is going on with this world? Yes. With just a glance, Noah could recognize that this was a completely different world from the one he was in before. There would be no fairy tale here. There would be no magnolia. There would be no companions that Noah was familiar with. There would also be no place where Noah was supposed to stay. For Noah, this world was completely unfamiliar. Of course, when Noah decided to enter other worlds and help those incomplete feathers to restore their original state, he had already mentally prepared himself. Therefore, even if he came to a completely unfamiliar world, Noah would not be at a loss, nor would he panic. However, at this moment, Noah was truly confused. Since he was entering another world, Noah did not have the extravagant hope that the world he went to was the same as the world he was originally in. However, what was going on with this world that was filled with despair? Could it be that I didn't enter a complete world, but an incomplete world? But Noah had indeed touched a complete feather, so he should have come to a complete world. Moreover, from the feathers that represented each world, Noah also obtained some relevant memory fragments. Therefore, Noah knew that an incomplete world was a world that had been destroyed to a certain extent. Not to mention not being able to enter, even if they could, they would instantly lose their lives due to various circumstances. For example, in a broken world, some had no air, some had no water, some had no food, and some had no living creatures. Unless they could be repaired, it would be a real hell. It was because of this that Noah couldn't help but think that the world in front of him wasn't complete. After all, the atmosphere of despair was too strong, wasn't it? In addition, Noah was also very concerned about one thing. Noah raised his eyes and looked in a certain direction. He tightened the long sack on his shoulder. He saw that somewhere far away from Noah, there was a place that looked like a city. Why did he say that it was similar? That was because a normal city would definitely not be like the city that Noah saw, surrounded by huge black stone monuments that reached into the clouds and were much taller than normal mountains. That was a city that was surrounded by huge black stone monuments that reached into the clouds. Staring at the city that was surrounded by huge black stone monuments, Noah sighed after a while. Looks like I've come to a very amazing world. After saying that, Noah patted his cheeks and pulled himself together. No matter what, there is a place where humans gather. I will definitely be able to obtain some information. Let's first understand what kind of world I've come to. There was no way for a world to dry up a world. Therefore, even if a part of the fragments of an incomplete world were in a different world, the world itself had no way to take them out and restore the incomplete world to its original state. Otherwise, there would be no need for Noah to go through so much trouble to go to another world to collect the fragments of a world. What kind of form would the fragments of a world exist in? Noah also didn't know clearly. Some of them would be scattered in a certain place. Some of them would be hidden in a certain object. Some of them would need to be found personally. Some of them would need to meet certain conditions to appear on their own. All in all, Noah wanted to find the fragments of a world. If he was lucky, he would be able to find them in 1 or 2 days. But if he was unlucky, he might not be able to find them in 10 or 20 years. What Noah could do was to obtain all the useful information. As long as he obtained information related to the fragments of a world, Noah would be able to receive hints from the current world and obtain traces of the fragments of a world. For example, last time, after Noah received information about the celestial Wolf Island, he received a hint about that world and entered the dreamland, where he truly saw the location of the world fragment. And before obtaining a certain amount of information, even Noah's world would not know the location of the fragments of a world. In other words, Noah was like a detector for the fragments of a world. After entering the world of the fragments of a world, as long as he obtained a certain amount of information, the current world would be able to use Noah as a detector to infer the location of the fragments of a world and give hints to Noah. In this way, Noah's existence was like, born in order to find the fragments of a world. Noah's eyes flashed with a complicated expression as he sighed again and again. In the end, after leaving Fairy's tale, the secret of my existence can only be obtained from such a depressing guess? It was just that Noah unexpectedly couldn't hate this task. There was no other way. Who told those feathers to be like children, pure and innocent, making it impossible for Noah to ignore them? So, cheer up. Unfortunately, there was someone who wanted to make things difficult for Noah. Gee! Following such a sharp sound, the ground where Noah was suddenly trembled. Noah's expression turned cold. Without hesitation, he jumped up and with an astonishing leap, he jumped more than 20 meters into the air. Pung! Suddenly, the ground where Noah was originally at was broken by a huge black shadow. Dirt and stones flew in all directions, and smoke and dust filled the air. Noah, who had jumped into the air, looked below him, and his pupils fiercely shrank. Gee! A 4 to 5 meter tall monster without fur, with veins popping out like water pipes, a body like a snake, and a head like a man-eating flower, drilled out from the ground. At the same time, it let out a sharp cry, and its mouth full of sharp teeth fiercely bit down, swallowing a lot of dirt. That was the dirt that Noah was originally at. If Noah did not jump up in time, then right now, he would be like the dirt, trapped by the disgusting monster's mouth full of unknown liquid, and enter the monster's stomach. Ha! Noah let out a laugh that sounded like anger. You're quite capable. After saying that, Noah directly used the air as a springboard. He turned his body, head down and feet up, and the soles of his feet fiercely stepped on the ground, causing the air to vibrate violently. At the same time, his body was like a bullet, turning into a shadow and shooting down. Shio! Amidst the sharp air-breaking noise, Noah, who was descending from the sky, spun around again. This time, he swung his leg out with all his might. Together with the explosive descent of his body, he landed a heavy kick on the disgusting head of the monster that looked like a man-eating flower. Pung! Before it could even make a sound, the 4 to 5 meter tall monster with a snake's body and a man-eating flower's head was directly kicked by Noah and exploded. Pa pa pa, the disgusting flesh with black blood scattered around, fell on the ground around, and after a few squirms, it stopped moving. This is not a demon, right? Noah, who landed on the ground, looked at the scattered flesh around, and smelled a kind of unpleasant stench in the air. He covered his nose, turned his head, and looked at the city surrounded by huge black stone tablets. My guess was right. We've really come to an incredible world. Chapter 81. Gazes from all directions were focused on Noah, making Noah, who was carrying a cloth bag, frown for a long time. Looking up and looking around, he saw that people who seemed to be residents of this city were passing by Noah. Most of them cast a scrutinizing look at Noah, and some even secretly talked about him, which made Noah somewhat unhappy. Noah, who just came to this world, couldn't have done anything that could attract people's attention. Therefore, the surrounding people were more or less pointing at Noah. There should be another reason. Noah just came to this world, and he didn't know much about this world. To avoid unnecessary disputes, it was better to avoid doing anything strange. Because of this, although Noah was very curious about the surrounding buildings, on the surface, he acted as if nothing had happened. About 30 minutes ago, Noah entered this city. As long as you raised your eyes and looked into the distance, no matter who it was, you could see the huge steels in any corner of this city. Relying on his extraordinary perception, Noah could feel that those huge black steels were faintly exuding some kind of strange fluctuation. It was these fluctuations that made the monsters outside, who wanted to get close to this city, as if they didn't dare to take a step forward. They had been wandering a certain distance away from this city. And this also allowed Noah to more or less get some information. Outside this city, there were many monsters like the monsters that attacked Noah. This kind of monster, but more bloodthirsty than ordinary monsters, seemed to bring a great threat to this city, and even the humans in this world. Moreover, it was a life-threatening threat. Therefore, humans seemed to be hiding in this city surrounded by steels that could emit obscure fluctuations to achieve the effect of driving away those monsters. This phenomenon, whether it was everywhere in this world, or only in this area, Noah still didn't know. To understand the situation, first of all, Noah had to find a place where he could collect information. However, Noah encountered a problem that was neither too big nor too small. Generally speaking, the best way to collect information at such a time was to go to a bar, hotel, restaurant, and so on. As long as one waited patiently, there would always be people who would talk about various topics during their idle chat, which could bring Noah a lot of information. However, Noah found that it was very difficult to find these places here. The reason was very simple. Sigh. Noah looked at the surrounding buildings and sighed as if he was exhausted. Where in the world is like a bar? That's right. Noah couldn't tell from the surrounding buildings where a bar or something like that was located. The buildings in this world seemed to be different from the buildings in Noah's original world to a certain extent. The surrounding buildings were made of stone bricks and glass, at least 10 to 20 meters in height. There were also buildings of ordinary height. However, these places were basically the same size and shape. It was either difficult to distinguish from the outside, or the plaque hanging above was written in words that Noah didn't recognize, making it impossible for Noah to find. This wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was that on some of the roads, there were some strange vehicles made of steel, with tires under them, going back and forth at different speeds. There were also some pillars on the road that were similar to magic lamps that changed colors from time to time. Only when a certain color was reached would the vehicle stop, allowing people to walk on the road and go to the other side. These rules, for a newcomer like Noah, although it wasn't difficult to determine what kind of actions to take under different circumstances, but when he thought of the various rules in this city that only he didn't know about, Noah felt all kinds of distress. It was also because of this that Noah's actions were quite restrained. Only when the people around him were doing the same thing, Noah would do it. Otherwise, Noah had to carefully control his actions to avoid causing trouble. Fortunately, not long after, Noah's eyes began to light up, and the corner of his mouth also curved up. In the place where Noah's line of sight was, in the middle of a row of buildings, there was a building that seemed to be a shop. There were rows of bookshelves in the shop, and the bookshelves were lined with old and new books. Books? Wasn't that a carrier that recorded all kinds of information? For Noah, this was a tool that could save his life. Immediately, Noah hurriedly walked to the bookstore. However, 5 minutes later, Noah came out of the bookstore gloomily. The owner in charge of selling books was an amiable old man. However, no matter how amiable he was, it was too much of a headache for Noah. There were 3 reasons. 1. Noah didn't know what language the other party spoke. 2. Noah didn't know any of the words on the books. 3. The currency Noah carried with him was not the same as the currency of this world. So, Noah simply hit a wall. Sigh. Noah realized that he had been sighing since he came to this world. I have to think of a way. In fact, Noah had some extraordinary understanding and memory. Otherwise, Noah couldn't have learned the language of the original world with just a few books without anyone's guidance, and reached the level of communicating with others. As long as certain conditions were met, Noah could learn a certain level of language expression. However, there had to be someone to communicate with Noah first, and with Noah's sensing ability, carefully observe and analyze what the other party meant when they expressed a certain language. Only then could he slowly learn the language. Just now, with this idea in mind, Noah tried to communicate with the owner of the bookstore, so that he could at least learn how to communicate, and then learn the language. However, 5 minutes later, because Noah didn't buy anything and kept speaking in a language that he didn't understand, the boss asked Noah to come out with a vexed expression. Although these 5 minutes allowed Noah to learn a certain level of answering, such as, yes, yes, no, hello, sorry, and other simple words, in the end, he still couldn't fully communicate with others. There's no other way. Noah rubbed his eyebrows. Although doing this will definitely be annoying and eye-catching, it's the only way now. Leaving this sentence, Noah began to work hard. The content of the work was simple. He kept looking for passers-by to talk. Not long after, on the street where Noah was, many passers-by were forcibly pulled by Noah to have all kinds of unrelated conversations. Because of this, Noah also received all kinds of treatment. Some warm-hearted people, after communicating with Noah for a period of time, were completely scared by Noah's pestering, and ran away with their tails between their legs. Some cold people were annoyed by Noah, and raised their fists wanting to teach Noah a lesson. In the end, these people were all thrown into small alleys by Noah, and also ran away with their tails between their legs. Some puzzled people had been playing a game of communication with Noah. Some people who were in a hurry, after being forcibly pulled by Noah, flew into a rage, and when there was no other way, they ran away like they were running away. In the end, Noah was brought to a room by a kind passerby. The people inside were all wearing strict uniforms, with hats on their heads, black short sticks on their waists, and silver handcuffs. Their faces were somewhat fiendish. About 2 to 3 days later, Noah came out of the room with satisfaction, leaving behind a group of people who had been burned to death lying on the ground, unable to get up again. Later, Noah found out. This place was called the police station. Those fiendish people who were pestered by Noah to the point of vomiting blood were called the police. Chapter 82. Walking on the road, Noah held a book in his hand, flipping through it while walking forward aimlessly. This book was taken by Noah from one of the office desks when he left the place called the police station. The title of the book was Protozoan War. During the 2 to 3 days in the police station, every day, Noah would be challenging the police's bottom line by pestering them and communicating with them one by one. In the end, although all the police in the police station respected Noah like a tiger and wanted to drive him away, Noah still successfully learned to communicate with them to a certain extent. If there weren't any problems, Noah would be able to carry out normal daily life communication smoothly. As for the language, Noah wanted to more or less master it through the book in his hand. Otherwise, Noah would not be able to smoothly obtain a lot of information recorded in the book, and that would be a bit of a problem. Of course, during the 2 to 3 days in the police station, Noah not only obtained a certain degree of communication ability, but also some information about this world. It was the same feeling Noah had when he first came to this world. This world, basically, could be said to be a world full of despair. About 9 years ago, this world was still a peaceful world with a population of more than 8 billion people. However, on a certain day 9 years ago, a kind of monster appeared in this world without warning, and with a terrifying infection ability, it gained an astonishing number of people and attacked the human world on a large scale. The monsters were collectively known as protozoan. They were creatures that were born after being infected with a terrifying virus that had high infectivity through blood and could rewrite the DNA of living creatures. The virus was called protozoan virus. Creatures infected with the protozoan virus, whether human or animal, would all be transformed into protozoan by the virus at an astonishing speed, becoming complete monsters. These monsters not only had terrifying and ferocious power, but they could also infect other creatures with the protozoan virus by injecting body fluids into them, turning the infected creatures into protozoan. They also had a certain degree of regeneration ability. Human weapons could not easily kill these monsters. Under such circumstances, a terrifying number of protozoa launched a large-scale attack on the human world 9 years ago, starting a world war. In the end, humans were defeated. The population of around 8 billion dropped sharply. Only about a tenth of them remained. In the past, the humans who had once ruled over the entire world had also been snatched away by the protogut animals. The remaining 10% of the human population was hiding in the remaining areas. Under the almost hopeless disparity, the protogut animals engaged in a long, tug-of-war for 9 years. And what protected the last areas of human survival and prevented humans from being completely wiped out were those huge black stone tablets that stood around the city. The monolith was a gigantic metallic monolith made of pitch-black metal. The monolith was able to emit a special, weak magnetic field. It possessed the ability to weaken the virus of the protozoa, causing the protozoa to lose their ability to regenerate, and causing the protozoa to instinctively stay away from them. It was because of the existence of the monolith that could cause the protozoa to lose their ability to regenerate that humans had the possibility of fighting the protozoa. The monolith, which was made of a large amount of monolith, was erected around the last remaining land of humans, using the magnetic field released by the monolith to isolate the protozoa, allowing humans to survive. But even so, humans could only hide in the places where the monolith existed to prolong their last breaths. Until now, they still dreamed of being able to reclaim their lost land in the future, but they could not do anything to the protogut animals, which had an astonishing number and power. This world was just so despairing. And the city Noah was in was called the Tokyo area. It was one of the 5 areas that was split into 5 after a country called Japan was invaded by the protogut animals. Noah's luck was really not bad. If it was not because he was around the Tokyo area when he descended into this world, Noah would have been besieged by the army of protogut animals that could only be described as terrifying. Noah did not know what level of power these monsters called protogut animals had. However, after 2 to 3 days of hard work, Noah also found out that creatures infected by the protogut animal virus would mutate in a short period of time and mix the infected DNA with the DNA of other animals, turning into terrifying and ferocious monsters, known as protogut animals. And the more DNA of different species mixed with the protogut animals, the stronger and harder their strength and outer skin would be. Therefore, basically, protogut animals were divided into levels I to 4 according to the strength of the protogut animals. Generally, protogut animals that were only infected with the DNA of one species and had the ability to possess the DNA of one species were the weakest, stage I. Those that were infected with 2 or more protogut animals and had the ability to possess the DNA of 2 or 3 species would evolve to stage 2. Protogut animals in stage 3 and stage 4 generally had the DNA of multiple species and also had all the advantages and abilities of these species, which was very terrifying. When he first arrived in this world, he was kicked to the point of exploding by Noah's crisp kick, causing him to be unable to even regenerate. The stage of the protozoan should be stage 2, a protozoan with the DNA of more than 2 species. Noah had the power to destroy stage 2 in one hit, but he did not know how strong stage 3 and stage 4 were. When he thought of this, Noah could not help but mutter. This world doesn't let people have a good life at all, it's too boring. At this time, a commotion sounded in front of Noah, attracting the attention of Noah, who was immersed in the book and trying to decipher the meaning of those words. Noah raised his head and looked to the front. At the next moment, a young girl, who was not even 10 years old and dressed in tattered clothes and had a face full of soot, ran over in a panic. She pushed through the crowd and ran as if she was running for her life. Behind the little girl, a group of people, rather than saying that they were angry, were chasing in this direction with murderous intent. Obviously, they were chasing the little girl in front of them. Seeing this, Noah frowned. When the surrounding people saw this situation, they were curious and nosy and wanted to get closer. However, when the little girl's eyes were exposed to the surrounding people's eyes, the surrounding people immediately stopped in their tracks. The look in their eyes instantly dropped to the freezing point. Disgust and even hatred appeared on their faces from the bottom of their hearts. Without saying anything, they directly left. Noah saw it too. The little girl's eyes, which caused this phenomenon, were crimson like blood. This made Noah unable to react in time for a moment, and he came face to face with the little girl who was running for her life. Ah! The little girl seemed to only realize that there were people in front of her until now. She quickly stopped, and the panic on her face became more and more intense. Even, faintly, Noah could see a trace of despair in the other party's crimson eyes. Finally, a group of middle-aged and young people surrounded the little girl with murderous intent. They mercilessly reached out to the little girl, and tightly grabbed her. "Caught you! Hateful monster! How dare you come here? See how I deal with you!" A frightened expression appeared on the little girl's dirty face, and she began to scream. "Let me go!" After the voice fell, a scene that made Noah surprised happened. Pung! The little girl only struggled for a moment, and those middle-aged and young people who were holding her tightly, whether in terms of size or strength, obviously could not lose to a little girl who was less than 10 years old, flew out one after another as if they were hit by a huge heavy object, and fell to the ground. The strength of this little girl, who was less than 10 years old, was actually so great that she could break free from nearly 10 adults. It seemed that there were many things in this world that Noah did not know. Chapter 83. Because of the struggle of the little girl with crimson eyes, the people who fell to the ground were all dizzy and couldn't get up in a short time. Seeing this situation, the little girl didn't react, but the people around her actually showed anger. Sure enough, she's a monster. She's a pest that only hurts humans. Kill. Kill her. The people who had turned a blind eye to everything just a moment ago now surrounded the panic-stricken little girl with a face full of fear in the middle. Witnessing all this, the thoughts in Noah's mind could be summed up in 3 simple words. Why? Why is this little girl called a monster? Why are the people around her not only watching her die, but also planning to hit her when she's down? Why are the little girl's eyes crimson? Why is it that a group of Tokyo residents who looked very normal just now, at this time, can easily say, "Kill her," to a little girl less than 10 years old? I don't understand. Noah really doesn't understand. However, Noah doesn't understand, it doesn't mean that he will stand by and do nothing. Without the slightest hesitation, Noah went straight forward. Under everyone's stunned gaze and the little girl with crimson eyes hiding in panic, he grabbed the little girl's hand and then walked out of the crowd. Hey! After reacting, including those who chased the little girl from the ground, everyone blocked Noah's way and stared at Noah with sinister eyes. Who are you? Do you want to go? Do you want to protect that monster? Be careful that she will turn into an animal at any time and eat you, stinky brat. The people who blocked Noah's way all shouted, and some even did not hesitate to speak ill of Noah, causing more and more people to watch, and more people to cast a terrifying look at Noah with a face full of disgust and hatred. On the contrary, the little girl whose hand was held by Noah seemed to be unable to believe that Noah would stand up for her. She was stunned and even forgot to struggle. Seeing that there were more and more people around him, and the number of comments that were filled with vulgarities and even vulgarities, Noah could not help but feel a tinge of anger rising in his heart. He swung his hand that was carrying the cloth bag on his shoulder and grabbed the cloth bag in his hand. Seeing this, the surrounding voices disappeared in an instant. The expressions of the people who were angry and hateful just now froze, looked at each other and spat out saliva. TCH, he's actually a police officer. No wonder he went to protect such a monster. For them, these monsters are rare tools to be used, right? What bad luck. The people who were saying these words no longer looked at Noah. Instead, they glanced at the little girl with crimson eyes with unwillingness. They began to discuss in groups of 2s and 3s while dispersing. Seeing this, Noah was slightly startled, and a thoughtful look flashed across his eyes. Police officer? It was another unknown word. Noah looked at the monolith in the distance and was somewhat anxious. Without a certain degree of understanding of this world, his actions were bound to be limited. He had to hurry up and obtain the necessary information to understand this world. 1 week later, outside of the monolith, which was the border of the human living area, was the area where the protozoa rampaged without restraint. It was all listed as an unexplored area in international intelligence. In such an extremely dangerous place, Noah stood on a piece of land that was the color of a rotten tree trunk. He looked at the dark gray sky, and his dark and deep eyes were filled with a kind of unprecedented blankness. In this week's time, other than learning the language and communication in the Tokyo area, Noah spent the rest of his time hunting protozoa outside of the monolith. Noah did not have the currency of this world. Therefore, after inadvertently learning that some research facilities were purchasing parts of protozoa's bodies for research, Noah often came to hunt protozoa. By selling parts of the protozoa's bodies, he earned some living expenses. And now, after a week of this life, Noah had basically solved the communication and language problems. Therefore, he also learned about the cruel reality. Noah, who carried a weapon with him, seemed to be mistaken for a police officer. The so-called police officer was the abbreviation of a civilian police company. It was a civilian organization that was responsible for dealing with protozoa-related incidents. The main job of the police was to eliminate the protozoa that broke into the human living area from the outside. Because it was in the form of a civilian company, the police usually carried out their tasks in the form of a commission. The content of the task did not only include eliminating the invading protozoa, but also various tasks such as bodyguard, escort, search, and so on. Sometimes, they also had to accept the government's instructions and carry out the task. From this point of view, the nature of the police's work was similar to that of a sorcerer. However, the difference was that the police were usually carried out by 2 people. One was the police officer. The other was the cursed child. A special human born with the emergence of protozoa, the cursed child. They were children who had the protozoa virus's genes. Because the mother ingested the protozoa virus during pregnancy, the virus accumulated in the fetus's body and was born. Thus, they had a certain level of protozoa's ability, which was superior physical ability and regenerative ability. Because the cursed child was infected in the embryonic stage, but because the speed of mutation was very slow, they had a high-speed self-healing ability, agility, and strength that exceeded that of humans. And when the cursed child liberated the protozoa virus in their body and gained power, the phenomenon that appeared was that they would turn into dark red pupils. That was the best proof of their status as a cursed child. Because the cursed child had the power to rival the protozoa, people used this power completely in the war against the protozoa. Therefore, the police officers of the civilian police company were all in groups of 2 people. They were carriers of the protozoa virus, or the cursed child. Because they could use the power of the protozoa virus and had the physical regeneration ability of the protozoa, they were the main combat force of the 2-person team. This type of person who formed a partnership with the police and was also the cursed child was collectively known as the initiator. And as the partner of the initiator to assist in the battle and provide core support to the initiator, they were usually the guardians of the initiator. Most of them were ordinary humans. Although their combat ability might not be as good as the initiator, they were basically good fighters. They were responsible for giving orders and had the intangible responsibility of being the spiritual pillar of the initiator. They were collectively known as promoters. Because the protozoan virus had appeared less than 10 years ago, the initiator, or rather, the cursed child, were all children under the age of 10. And they were all women. This group of little girls who were born without knowing anything were not only used as props, but because of the protozoa virus in their bodies, they were not treated as humans at all. Monsters. This was the reason why the little girl with dark red eyes was rejected and even attacked by people. After knowing this, Noah finally understood. This world was not only full of despair, but also darker and more unbearable than he imagined. Looking at the Tokyo area where the monolith was located, Noah was speechless for a long time. After a long time, he looked at the fairy's coat of arms on the back of his hand and clenched his fist tightly. At this moment, Noah made a decision. Chapter 84. The sun dispelled the darkness, making it even darker than the darkness. The monolith that surrounded the Tokyo area could be seen from afar under the sky. Today, the huge rectangular black wall with a height of 1,618 kilometers and a width of 1 kilometer was still like an iron tower that connected the sky and the earth. It stood in people's line of sight at a certain distance. Undoubtedly, if such a scene existed in the natural landscape, it would be so out of place, but for some reason, it made people feel awe. However, that was also to be expected. After all, only the area in the middle of the monolith was the last paradise left for the humans of this world. In the blink of an eye, the demarcation line between the areas where humans and primitive animals lived by the monolith had existed for 10 years. Because of the war, the areas in the Tokyo area that could be preserved intact were unified and divided into 43 areas. Starting from District 1, which was the center of the Tokyo area, the closer it was to the border of the monolith, the larger the number of districts, all the way to District 43. Beyond that would be the unexplored territory of the protozoa. And in the periphery of the 43 districts in the Tokyo area, which was closer to the monolith, or even the border area, no one was willing to live in. They were collectively called the Outer District. Here, people's breath was sparse to a terrifying degree. Moreover, incredible things could be seen everywhere. For example, it was unimaginable that the footprints of huge monsters came from humans. For example, a chair stained with blood. For example, a four-wheeled car with a broken window. The inside of the car was bright red like rust, which made people think of the unknown color of blood. Another example was the unknown reddish-purple weeds that grew from the cracks of the stone. The ground here was basically barren like the wilderness. The buildings seemed to have been trampled by some monster, and were comparable to ruins. This was the outer district of the Tokyo area, a place that no one was willing to go near, let alone live there. However, in such a desperate area, in the 39th district, there was such a place. A place surrounded by walls, the size of a small town. There were many buildings that were obviously new. Compared to the ruins outside the walls, the buildings were quite intact. Although these buildings couldn't be compared to the high-rise buildings in the inner district of the Tokyo area, they were still regular residences. Presumably, for those who lived in the outer district all year round, abandoned by their biological parents and rejected by the people, this was definitely a dream paradise. And if one looked carefully, they would find. In this small area surrounded by walls, at the top of the only gate, there was a plaque hanging. On the plaque was written, "Fairy Tale. President. President." In a school the size of an elementary school, Noah, who was reading a thick book, was surrounded by a group of girls who were less than 10 years old who had just finished class. They pestered Noah with their crisp voices as if they were acting spoiled. "Tell us a story. President." "Another story?" There were already 2 or 3 children climbing on top of Noah, who was hanging on top of him, put down the book in his hand. The expression on his face was gentle, but his tone was somewhat helpless. "In class, there should be a teacher who will tell you a story, right? The teacher's words are not as interesting as the president's." The children shouted out. "We want to hear the president's story." Okay. Noah could only shrug his shoulders and pull down the children who were hanging on him. After pondering for a moment, he smiled slightly. "Do you know why we call this place Fairy Tale?" The children naturally shook their heads, their faces filled with curiosity and bewilderment. In fact, whether the fairy has a tail or not, or even whether the fairy exists, this point, no one knows. Facing the gazes of the children, Noah spoke softly in a tone that sounded as if it came from a faraway place. "But it is precisely because of this that an eternal mystery will become an eternal hope. I created Fairy Tale to tell everyone that, just like the mystery of whether a fairy has a tail or not, or even whether it exists, never give up hope." Noah looked around at the children who more or less had a longing expression on their faces and closed his eyes. "One day, you will also have to step foot in the outside world and come into contact with the people in the outside world. At that time, you will definitely encounter all kinds of difficulties. However, even if there are people who reject you, hate you, make things difficult for you, or even want to hurt you, you cannot give up hope. As long as you believe in hope, the fairy will definitely appear by your side. So, never forget. It doesn't matter if you are the cursed child that everyone hates, you are still a member of Fairy's Tale. Fairy's Tale will always be your home." Hearing this, the children's faces all showed a happy expression. This kind of expression also made Noah's heart feel unusually peaceful. Noah would never forget that a year ago, when he first came to the outer area, the faces of the cursed children here were gray, alert, indifferent, and had red eyes that seemed to hate everything in the world. For the sake of these cursed children, Noah had worried a lot for the past year. Now, he was finally able to let Fairy Tale become the hope in these children's hearts, allowing these children to live the lives of ordinary children. And this was all that Noah could do. Of course, in this way, there were also all kinds of troubles. President Noah. A middle-aged man in a black suit with a gun at his waist sat expressionlessly at the door. "The car is already waiting outside. That person is also waiting for President Noah's visit. President Noah, please take some time and come with us." Noah glanced at the middle-aged man and did not say anything. Instead, he said to the children around him, "Okay, it's time for class. You all should go back to the classroom." Yes, the children immediately left obediently and returned to the classroom. Noah then reached out and took the long cloth bag that had been on the ground beside him. He stood up and walked out of the door. Tokyo, District 1, in this place called the heart of Tokyo, a long limousine drove from afar and finally stopped in front of a building. A person in a suit like a bodyguard appeared out of nowhere and opened the door of the limousine. Noah, who was sitting inside, got out of the car and stood in front of the building in front of him. That's probably the so-called Neo-Gothic style building, right? The curved window glass embedded in the white and smooth stone pillars shaped like ivory, and the wavy slanted door. Many parts of the luxurious building in front of him used the aesthetics that Noah saw in books. It was a palace that people couldn't find fault with. Noah just glanced at such a building, and then, accompanied by 2 guards, he was led into the building called Holy Residence. It didn't take long for the 2 guards to open a huge door and let Noah walk into a brightly lit hall. In the hall, the 2 people opened their eyes as soon as Noah came in. They seemed to have closed their eyes tightly until just now, as if they were resting, and their eyes focused on Noah. Looking at the 2 people in front of him who were undoubtedly big shots, Noah's eyes flashed. Chapter 85. Bang! As if on purpose, the door of the hall was slammed shut, letting the loud bang reverberate throughout the hall. Noah did not care about this threatening action. He looked up and looked at the other 2 people present other than him. It was a combination of a man and a woman. The first thing that attracted Noah's attention was a pure white girl sitting on a rather noble sofa. The girl's age was about the same as Noah's, maybe even 1 or 2 years younger. She wore a paper-thin pure white dress, very similar to a wedding dress, and a sun hat on her head, as if she was wearing a large amount of snow. It was easy to attract attention. The girl's skin was naturally white like a pearl. Her shoulder-length curly short hair, and her face was so straight that it made people lose their minds. It was as if a superb painter had spent his life painstakingly drawing such a beautiful face. No one could ignore it. Even Noah looked at the snow-white girl and narrowed his eyes. Seiko. Of course, this was not the girl's real name. It was similar to the nature of inheritance, a title only left for people of the girl's current status. 10 years ago, the country called Japan was forced to be divided into 5 regions because of the persecution of primitive animals. The girl in front of him, who was the same age as Noah, was the ruler of the region where Noah was located, the Tokyo region. The other person was standing behind the sofa where Seiko was sitting. He was over 70 years old, with a serious expression, a straight back, and a tall figure, wearing a kimono culottes. He was the assistant official in charge of supporting Seiko. He was in the true sense of the highest authority of politicians, the Prime Minister of Tendo Chrysanthemum. In other words, now, the 2 people in front of Noah were the 2 people with the highest status in the Tokyo region. Facing these 2 decision-makers who could have the greatest impact on the entire Tokyo region in various senses, Noah couldn't help but size them up a little, and then walked forward. As if waiting for Noah to come closer, Seiko didn't open her red lips until Noah came in front of her, and spoke in a beautiful voice. Nice to meet you, Fairy Tale's president, Mr. Noah Doria. I've heard a lot about you. It is indeed the first time we've met. In response to the greeting of the supreme ruler of the Tokyo region, Noah just responded faintly. Then, he turned his gaze to the Tendo Chrysanthemum Prime who had been staring at him. However, I've had quite a few dealings with this person over here. With the appearance of this sentence, the atmosphere dropped to the freezing point. The gazes of Noah and the celestial child, Chrysanthemum Prime, seemed to have ignited fierce sparks, filled with a feeling of mutual hostility. Noah was speaking the truth. It was already not the first time Noah came into contact with the celestial Chrysanthemum Prime. Fairy Tale was built by Noah a year ago in the outskirts of the Tokyo area. It changed the miserable life of the cursed children and gave them shelter. However, this upright and plain-spoken old man in front of him was an existence that could never get along with Fairy Tale. Since the outbreak of the Protozoa War 10 years ago, humanity faced the greatest crisis in history. The population of 8 billion was reduced to only 1/10 in a short period of time. One could imagine how many people's families died in the hands of the protozoa. These people who survived the Protozoa War, and most of them were robbed of their loved ones by the protozoa. Most of them hated the protozoa and the cursed children who had the protozoa virus in their bodies. Their discrimination against the cursed children was very serious. Therefore, they were also known as the plundered generation. As for those born after the Protozoa War, including the cursed children, they were known as the pure generation. Chrysanthemum Prime was the representative of the plundered generation. His wife was also killed in the hands of the protozoa. Because of this, the celestial child, Chrysanthemum Prime Minister, hated the primordial intestines and the cursed child to the extreme. He naturally hated the fairy tale, who had taken in many of the cursed children, and could be said to be the gathering place of the cursed children. In the past year, ever since the establishment of fairy tale, this person had been secretly plotting against fairy tale. It was also because of Chrysanthemum Prime that Noah, in the past year, went from being unaccustomed and at a loss when it came to conspiracies at the beginning to now, he had gained a variety of experience and ways to deal with the smooth confrontation of the dark side and the regime. Chrysanthemum Prime actually did not want to take Noah's life. However, if that could destroy the fairy's tale and the cursed child, the celestial child Chrysanthemum Prime definitely wouldn't mind doing so. Noah didn't hate the celestial Chrysanthemum Prime Minister. However, for this person who discriminated against the cursed child and tried to kill the cursed child, if there was a chance, Noah would definitely not hesitate to pull him down from his position. Because of this, Noah and the celestial Chrysanthemum Prime Minister definitely couldn't be considered old friends. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they were sworn enemies. To be honest, I really admire Mr. Noah for being able to establish an organization like Fairy Tale in just a short year. Saint Sun, who clearly knew this, seemed to want to change the topic. Now, other than the Tokyo area, rumors of the fairy tale have also begun to spread in the 4 other areas. Recently, not to mention the Tokyo area, even the cursed children in the other 4 areas have risked their lives to join the fairy tale, crossing unexplored territory and coming to the Tokyo area. This really surprised me. Is that so? Noah's eyes seemed to want to see through Saint Sun's heart. But, Saint Sun, you didn't ask me to come here this time to praise me, right? I do have something to talk to you about, Mr. Noah. Sensing that Noah wanted to get to the heart of the matter, Saint Sun pondered for a moment and no longer hid it. Mr. Noah, you should know that the existence of fairy tale has a great impact on the Tokyo area and the other 4 areas, right? Now, as long as you live in the former land of Japan, no matter where you are, you will know that fairy's tale is the only paradise that can accommodate the cursed child and allow the cursed child to live a normal life without discrimination. Tentong Kikushima said indifferently. Even in foreign countries, there seems to be rumors of this, causing a lot of cursed children to become restless. Oh. Noah's expression did not change. And then? What are you trying to say? Mr. Noah. Saint Sun said this sentence with an almost puppet-like expression. The people of the International Initiator Supervising Organization should have had a lot of contact with you, right? Noah did not refute, his expression was still as usual, but he acquiesced to Saint Sun's words. The International Initiator Supervising Organization, abbreviated as ISO, is an international organization that manages and allocates the initiator and promoter partners. Mr. Noah, you have taken in a large number of cursed children, which has hindered the management of ISO. Saint Sun said seriously. No, it should be said that your actions have caused harm to the world to a certain extent. Chapter 86. Noah's actions had caused harm to the world. It might be easy to think of this as exaggeration, but Noah understood why the Holy Son of Heaven would say this. In this desperate era, even if there was the existence of the chi that could suppress the rebirth of the protozoa, humans could only barely survive the confrontation with the protozoa, and would not be completely wiped out. Under such circumstances, the police force formed by the initiator and the promoter, who could fight against the protozoa, was the world's last hope. It was said that the most powerful initiator could even influence the military situation of the entire world. From this, it could be seen how important the cursed children, who could display abilities comparable to that of the protozoa, and had the precursor of the protozoa virus in their bodies, were. However, due to the existence of the fairy tale, the number of initiators began to decrease sharply. I heard that the people from the International Initiator Supervision Organization, ISO, had contacted Fairy Tale, hoping that Fairy Tale could provide them with the cursed child, so that they could use the cursed child as an initiator and assign it to the police as a partner. However, Mr. Noah rejected them, right? Elysium's expression was very serious. With all due respect, Mr. Noah, your actions will cause many police partners that can fight the protozoa to be unable to be born, indirectly causing us to lose a large amount of power to fight the protozoa. Do you know that? Hearing this, Noah more or less understood the Holy Son of Heaven's intention. In other words, Lord Holy Son of Heaven, you want to persuade me? Noah looked at the Holy Son of Heaven with a smile that was not a smile. You want me to compromise and provide the people from Fairy Tale to be manipulated by you to form the so-called police partners? Mr. Noah, I heard that you also obtained your police license a year ago, but you refused to be the initiator partner assigned by the International Initiator Supervision Organization, ISO, right? Elysium asked sincerely. Why did you do that? Why? Noah glanced at Chrysanthemum Prime and closed his eyes. A cold smile that was rarely seen 1 year ago appeared on his face. Because I am very disgusted by this kind of method that casually distributes children like tools. The Holy Son of Heaven was slightly startled and then fell silent. Lord Elysian Son of Heaven, I'm sure you know why I created Fairy Tale, right? Noah looked straight at Elysian Son of Heaven. To be honest, if the people from the International Initiator Monitoring Organization, ISO, would conduct a strict assessment of the police officers who need to be assigned to the initiator, then I wouldn't have any objections. However, what surprised me was that the ISO didn't even investigate the character of the police officers who need to be assigned to the initiator. Basically, as long as they are police officers, they will assign the initiator to them. That's right. Noah took a step forward, his dark pupils like arrows meeting Elysian Son of Heaven's eyes. To them, it doesn't matter what kind of treatment the children receive, or what kind of treatment their police partners will give them. As long as they can form a police partner and fight against the primitive animals, they don't need to consider anything else. I created Fairy Tale because I don't want the children to be treated cruelly and discriminated against. I want them to be able to live like ordinary people. Noah's voice echoed throughout the hall of the Holy Son of Heaven and Chrysanthemum Prime's ears. Therefore, I can't agree with the International Initiator Monitoring Organization, ISO's practice of not caring that the children will be abused by the police partners in name, so I rejected them. But your rejection is really endangering the entire world and mankind. Before Elysian Son of Heaven could speak, Chrysanthemum Prime's cold voice sounded. Can you bear the responsibility for the extinction of mankind? Guilt? Noah laughed. His laughter was unusually sarcastic. Then, in the eyes of the celestial assistant, no matter how the cursed child is abused to death, it's not a crime, right? Those people are just monsters, demons that destroy the world, they are not human at all. If they are not human, what crime is it to kill them all? These words all sounded in Chrysanthemum Prime's heart after hearing Noah's words. However, Chrysanthemum Prime didn't say it out loud. He just stared at Noah, his cold gaze could poke a hole in Noah's body. Noah sneered and turned his gaze back to Elysian Son of Heaven, who was more or less speechless. No matter where it is, humans seem to have a saying that the police partnership formed by the initiator and promoter is the last hope of the world, but in my opinion, this saying is no different from a joke. In front of the two highest rulers of Tokyo, Noah said these words coldly. On one hand, one of the police partners, the cursed child, is the last hope of the world, but on the other hand, more than 90% of the people treat the hope in their mouth as garbage that needs to be swept away. Humans are really a kind of stupid creatures that like to carry out contradictions to the end and smash their own feet with a rock. This time, not to mention Elysian Son of Heaven, even Chrysanthemum Prime was speechless. Noah curled his lips in boredom, took out a stack of paper from his jacket, and threw it on the table in front of Elysian Son of Heaven. This is... Elysian Son of Heaven and Chrysanthemum Prime both looked at the paper in front of them at the same time, then they were stunned and surprised. The personal information of the police partners of the initiator and promoter? That is the relevant information of the police partners that were personally reviewed by Fairy Tale, and the cursed child in Fairy Tale were assigned to qualified police partners. Noah turned his gaze to Chrysanthemum Prime and said as if he was provoking him. Let's not talk about whether or not I can bear the responsibility of the extinction of humanity, but fairy tale will not hide the real hope of the world. Not only do we have schools, hospitals, and children's residences, we even have an initiator training facility for children who want to become combat forces, to train children into qualified initiators. There are quite a few active initiators on this list. The two of you can find out with a little investigation. In front of Elysian son of heaven and chrysanthemum prime, Noah said indifferently, I believe that the initiators that came out of my fairy tale will definitely not be worse than the other initiators, and this is also the reason why the International Initiator Supervision Organization, ISO, compromised with us, and admitted that we can self-distribute the initiators internally. After saying this, Noah turned around. Then, the two of you should have nothing to say, right? Elysian son of heaven and chrysanthemum prime were both silent. Noah also directly walked out of the hall under the silent gaze of Elysian son of heaven and chrysanthemum prime. The hall of the holy residence was silent, and no one spoke for a long time. Chapter 87. Tokyo, District 39, Fairy Tale. In his own residence, Noah casually tossed aside the long cloth bag that had been slung over his shoulder. Then, he sat down on the sofa in a paralyzed manner. One of his hands covered his eyes and his whole body exuded an aura of exhaustion. If possible, Noah would rather fight to the death with the protozoa for an entire day and night than engage in a conversation with those in power like the Holy Son of Heaven and Chrysanthemum Tenzin. That would be too tiring. Even after an entire year, Noah had basically gotten used to this kind of tiredness and was unwilling to be tormented like this. After 1 year, he had fully understood the dark side of human nature and assimilated himself into this world of despair. Only then did Noah realize how wonderful the days he spent in that fairy tale were. That caused Noah to miss that fairy tale almost every day. He missed his companions who grew up together with him. Of course, due to Noah's intervention, this world now had the existence of the fairy tale. No matter what, regardless of which world the fairy tale belonged to, Noah would do his best to protect it. No matter how tiring, no matter how bitter, as long as he could achieve this goal, it would be worth it. Forget it, I won't think about it anymore. Noah rubbed his eyebrows and turned his head to look at the door of a room. He stood up and walked over. Pushing open the door, Noah walked into the room. It was an extremely dim room. There were no fluorescent lights on the ceiling and there were no windows around. In such a dim room, there was an apparatus that was as tall as a person. In the middle of the apparatus was a culture tank the size of a thumb connected to it. It was a culture tank filled with an unknown liquid. It appeared as though it was boiling and bubbling. If there was an expert here who had a good understanding of the protozoa, they would be shocked to discover that the unknown liquid in the culture tank was a processed protozoa virus. It was not a virus extracted from the protozoa's body and filtered out of the body fluids and blood. Instead, it was the most primitive virus that infected in the form of a virus, causing the protozoa to appear in the protozoa. Usually, humans and even living creatures would be infected with the protozoa virus and the protozoa could only be infected through the blood. In other words, the protozoa virus could not be infected through the air. Otherwise, humans would have long ceased to exist in this world. However, that did not mean that the protozoa virus did not exist in the air. In fact, experts had long since proven that the protozoa virus could also be active in the air. They would enter through the mouth of humans, but they would not infect humans and cause the protozoa. This was a theory that had been confirmed after countless experiments. However, although the protozoan virus that entered the mouth of a human wouldn't infect them, it wouldn't cause immediate death either. If the airborne protozoan virus happened to enter a pregnant woman's body through her oral cavity, the pregnant woman would sometimes give birth to a fetus with protozoan DNA in its body. Most of the cursed children came from this. The device in front of him was a device that could extract the protozoa virus in the air and collect all kinds of protozoa viruses. Although the culture tank filled with protozoa viruses was only the size of a thumb, there were at least hundreds of protozoa viruses mixed with species factors inside. With such a high concentration of protozoa viruses, if anyone accidentally let even 1% of them enter their body, they would probably instantly transform into a protozoa and become a complete monster. It was impossible for Noah not to know that. However, Noah's next move would definitely make the onlookers dizzy. Gotcha! They saw Noah reach into the culture tank the size of a thumb and take out a test tube connected to a needle from the device below the culture tank. Then, he stabbed it into his arm without hesitation. In the culture tank, the protozoa viruses that had gathered into a thick liquid form immediately flowed through the device and into the test tube. In less than 10 seconds, they were all injected into Noah's body. In the next moment, Noah's pair of dark pupils that were as deep as the stars trembled violently. In the blink of an eye, they all turned crimson and dyed Noah's pupils red. That pair of blood-red eyes were exactly the same as the cursed child's. Thump. Thump. Noah's heart was beating violently. Gulp. While his whole body was releasing a shocking amount of heat, Noah's vision began to distort up and down. The illusion that his limbs seemed to be expanding outwards also appeared. Bang! His muscles seemed to be burning, causing Noah's arm that was pierced with the needle to tremble. The needle that was stuck in his body was immediately pushed out of his body like a bullet and bounced off. Creak! Noah's chest made such a sound. In an instant, it expanded greatly, and the bones in his body also made abnormal sounds of friction. It was under such circumstances that the protozoa viruses injected into Noah's body strengthened Noah's body at an unimaginable speed. Because of the protozoa viruses in their bodies, the cursed children possessed high-speed self-regeneration ability and physical strength that ordinary people could not possess. Moreover, the protozoa viruses in the cursed children's bodies contained animal factors that would also give them various advantages and abilities that this kind of animal possessed. Now, Noah had been injected with the protozoa viruses that contained at least hundreds of species factors. The strengthening he received was also hundreds of times that of an ordinary cursed child. At the same time, he could also obtain the advantages and abilities of this species factor. Unfortunately, if Noah, who was not a cursed child, continued to be affected by the protozoa viruses like this, he would only end up becoming a protozoa. Only Noah knew that he would never become a protozoa. The following scene also proved this point. After an unknown amount of time, the abnormalities in Noah's body began to stop. His body that was shaking like lice also slowly returned to calmness. The crimson pupils faded bit by bit, and the ominous color gradually disappeared until a certain moment, the dark pupils that belonged to Noah returned once again. Phew! Noah, who had been suppressing the sudden changes in his body, exhaled a long breath. He shook his arms and felt his body that had once again undergone a great deal of strengthening. No matter how many times I go through it, I will always be surprised by my physique. Noah's physique was different from ordinary people. It had characteristics that ordinary people did not have. One of these characteristics was that it could eliminate all negative forces and side effects that acted on Noah's body. This included viruses. Under the effect of Noah's physique, the protozoa viruses that entered Noah's body not only got rid of the side effects of protozoa, but even the property of existing in the form of a virus was judged by Noah's body as a side effect and was completely broken down. Therefore, the protozoa viruses that entered Noah's body only left behind the effects of purely strengthening the body and bringing about various species advantages and abilities. During this year, Noah would inject the protozoa viruses into his body almost every other month. With the help of his physique and the protozoa viruses, his strength had been greatly improved during this year. Therefore, even though he still needed to spend time and effort on the operation of Fairy Tale, Noah's strength had still been greatly improved. After reinstalling the culture tank on the apparatus and activating the apparatus to collect the airborne protozoa viruses, Noah walked out of the room. The next time he came would be another month later. Ding dong. As if the time was calculated, Noah's doorbell rang. Chapter 88. Ding dong. Noah, who had just come out of his room, heard the doorbell ring. He was slightly startled, but immediately, his outstanding sensing ability clearly reflected the aura of the people outside the door to Noah, making Noah, who recognized the identity of the people outside, roll his eyes. Walking forward, Noah directly opened the door. The next moment, 3 figures were imprinted in his eyes. The people who came were a boy and a girl around 16 or 17 years old, and a little girl around 10 years old. Standing in front of the boy and girl was a little girl around 10 years old. The little girl was wearing a fashionable checkered line jacket, a short skirt, and a pair of thick boots. Her slightly swaying ponytails were pinned with a slightly large hairpin, and she had a big bright smile on her face. Standing behind the little girl on the left was a beautiful girl in black. She had a head of soft black hair that reached her waist, a sharp contrast with her snow-white skin. She was wearing a student sailor uniform, her eyes were slender, and she had a beautiful face. Standing to the right of the little girl was a listless young man. The youth was wearing a pure black student uniform that looked like a suit. The youth's left chest was pinned with an unknown high school badge, and there was a pistol at his waist. With one look, one could tell that he was not an ordinary student. Such a trio appeared in front of Noah just like that, with a smile on their faces. The difference was that the little girl's smile was the kind of lively and cute expression that came from the heart, while the smile on the faces of the youth and girl standing behind her was more or less fawning. Noah pretended not to see the youth and girl standing behind him, and greeted the cheerful little girl. Yenju? President. The little girl named Yenju directly threw herself at Noah, hanging on to Noah's body. I miss you so much. President. Liar. Undoubtedly, we just greeted each other in class this morning. Noah mercilessly pulled Yenju, who was hanging on his body, ignoring her dissatisfied expression, and patted her head. You seem to have grown a bit, right? Hearing this, Yenju's eyes lit up, and said excitedly. Is it the chest? As soon as she finished speaking, Noah directly knocked Yenju's head, causing her to cry out in pain. At the same time, he corrected her expressionlessly. It's height. Hey, hey, hey. President Noah. The girl who had been ignored all this time seemed to lack patience. She stepped forward and pointed at her own nose, emphasizing her presence. We're here too. We're here too. It's you? Unfortunately, Noah's reaction was extremely cold. Tomato-san and Riken-san, long time no see. Don't call me Tian Tong, just call me Mu Gung. Tian Tong Mu wrinkled his nose and said with some displeasure. Guild leader Noah, you're doing this on purpose, right? Is that so? Noah's reaction was still as cold as ever. Then I'm really sorry. Hey, Noah, you don't have to be so cold to us, do you? Rinken scratched his head. In any case, we've known each other for a year, we can be considered old friends, right? Then, my old friends Riken-san and Riken-san, why don't you let me guess the purpose of your visit? Noah suddenly smiled. If my guess is correct, the reason for your visit should be because the income of the Tentong Civilian Police Company last month was infinitely close to zero, and there was no business this month. Therefore, as the president, Tentong Mugino, and the police officers under his company saw that Rentaro was in a predicament where even his living expenses might be difficult, so they had no choice but to come to me, hoping that I would share some of the commissions that Fairy Tail received with you. Noah cast his gaze on Rinken Rentaro and Tendo Mugino, who both had frozen expressions. He narrowed his eyes. I'm right, right? Hee hee. Riken-san and Riken-san maintained their frozen expression and dryly laughed twice. Yenju, on the other hand, jumped up and down happily. As expected of the president of Fairy Tail, you guessed it all right. Is it really like this? Noah speechlessly looked at Riken-san and Riken-san. I say, how can there be people like you, running a police company to the point where you need to get commissioned work from other places? What can we do? Riken-san said even more angrily. It's all because our company's members are too useless. They can't make our company's name known, and their strength is so weak, of course people won't want to look for us. Is that really the case? Riken-san couldn't help but whisper and refute. The problem should be that the building where our company is located, the first floor is for gay, the second floor is for nightclubs, and the fourth floor is for loan sharks, right? If Riken-san is really a powerful police officer, the customers won't care about this at all. Riken-san glared at Riken-san, and then looked at Noah. His face hung a fake smile that couldn't be more fake. Well, anyway, President Noah's fairy tale receives a lot of commissions every day, right? It's okay to share some with us, right? The police's job is to solve matters related to gastronomic animals. Compared to purely police officers, the nature of fairy tale is quite complicated. Fairy tale has schools, hospitals, residences, and even initiator training facilities specially provided for the cursed child, and the money to maintain these facilities almost all came from Noah's personal wealth. By hunting gastronomic animals and selling their bodies to the research facilities for gastronomic animals, thus obtaining benefits. In the beginning, Noah used this method to earn money, and then used all the money to establish fairy tale, which led to the birth of fairy tale. And when the fairy tale was truly operating, Noah used the internal initiator to form partners with police officers that he approved of, and invited these police officers' partners into fairy tale. Under the name of fairy tale, they went out to work, earned a lot of money, and put fairy tale on the right track. Ordinary police officers under a civilian police company went out to work for a salary, and all the remuneration they received went to the company. Noah, on the other hand, let fairy tale learn from the other world's fairy tale. He made every commission into a commission form and posted it on the commission board. He let the police officers under him choose their own jobs, and 70% of the remuneration would go to the police officers themselves. This method of operation also attracted a lot of foreign police officers. After all, if they worked in fairy tale, as long as they were willing to work hard, the remuneration would definitely be much higher than the salary of ordinary police officers. In this way, fairy tale, as an alternative police organization, was recognized by many people in the industry. Now, fairy tale was one of the most famous police organizations in the Tokyo area. This was also the reason why these two thick-skinned people often came to visit Noah. Bang! Tenzo Mu threw a heavy punch, hitting Riken Rentaro's abdomen. Woo! Riken Rentaro suddenly let out a strange cry, holding his stomach and lying on the ground. Tenzo Mu immediately kneeled down, holding Riken Rentaro's head, and made a kneeling posture. We will abide by the rules of fairy tale, and only take 70% of the remuneration, so please work for us, otherwise we can only starve to death. Noah looked up to the sky and sighed, completely speechless. Chapter 89. In a gymnasium in Fairy Tale, Noah was currently confronting Rentaro Rikken and Yen Zhu Lan Yuan, a pair of police officers. 10 minutes ago, Tian Tongmu had happily gone to the main building where the police officers of Fairy Tale gathered and rested, where the commission orders were posted on the board. Rinzan Taro, Lan Yuan, and Yen Zhu, who were left behind, were called over by Noah to present such a scene. Opposite Noah, Rentaro kept sighing with a listless face, as if he was about to die. Lan Yuan Yen Zhu, on the other hand, looked eager to try. Noah, who was amused by the contrast between the two, smiled. You can attack me anytime. Okay. Yen Zhu shouted, which made Rinzan Taro sigh even louder. Do we really have to test her? Let me see how much your strength has improved. Noah smiled. After all, I was the one who personally taught Yen Zhu battle techniques a year ago. Although Yen Zhu comes back every day, I haven't tested her strength again. As for you, Rentaro, as Yen Zhu's partner, why don't you show off a little bit of your strength? Then why don't you just let Yen Zhu fight you? I'll just forget about it. Rinzan Taro shook his head. I'm so weak, I don't even know where my IP ranking is. How can I be your opponent? IP ranking. Developed and published by the International Instigator Monitoring Organization, ISO, the ranking of police partners is based on the number of protozoa each existing police partner has taken down and the results they have achieved. Although there were all kinds of problems with this ranking, such as the mutual promotion, restraint, and compatibility between individuals, some were better at fighting with humans, some were better at fighting with animals, and some were better at fighting with animals. There were also some strong people who did not want to be too high profile, and there were also some new stars who were just starting out. However, basically, the ranking given by the International Initiator Supervision Organization, ISO, was the standard to measure the popularity and strength of a pair of police partners. And if I'm not mistaken, Noah, you must have hunted down a lot of protozoa in the past year in order to gather enough funds to establish Fairy Tale, right? Rentaro felt like he was about to break out in a cold sweat. He asked with a respectful attitude. Then, what's your IP ranking now? It's been almost half a year since I've hunted a protogut animal. Plus, I've been rejecting the initiator partner that the International Initiator Supervision Organization, ISO, arranged for me. They don't seem to have any intention of raising my ranking. Noah spread his hands. So, if you ask me what my IP ranking is, I can only tell you that I don't know myself. Hey! Yenju was the first to cry out in dissatisfaction. The president is so strong, how can those guys not raise your ranking? Sigh. Rinzantaro covered his head. Even so, how can I beat someone who can teach the cursed child fighting skills, and who was personally acknowledged by Yenju to be strong? Don't you still have Yenju as your partner? Seeing Rinzantaro dragging his feet, even Noah was starting to get impatient. Anyway, don't hold back, just attack. Rinzantaro, it's okay if you use a gun, use all your skills. Use a gun? Rinzantaro looked at Noah in shock, his face full of uncertainty. You really want me to use a gun? Rinzantaro, you're really indecisive. Noah was helpless. Just do what I say. Do you think I'm going to kill myself? But... Rinzantaro seemed to want to say something, but this time, he was interrupted by Yenju, who was also getting impatient. Rinzantaro, you'll suffer if you underestimate the president. If you don't want to fight, I'll do it. As soon as she finished speaking, Yenju's eyes instantly turned crimson. Yenju. Rinzantaro was immediately shocked. When the eyes turned crimson, it was a sign that the cursed child had released the protozoa virus in her body. Therefore, when the cursed child's eyes turned crimson, she would be able to obtain a power that was comparable to the protozoa, or even far surpass the protozoa. Rinzantaro didn't know how strong Noah was, but wasn't it a little too much to release the power of the cursed child to deal with an ordinary human? Then. However, Yenju completely ignored Rintaro, who had cried out and failed to stop him in time. Instead, she bent forward. I'm on you. As soon as she finished speaking. Bang! With a loud stomping sound, Yenju's small body shot out like a rocket. Whoosh! A sharp sound of breaking through the air rang out. Yenju almost instantly reduced the distance of 10 meters between her and Noah to 0 and appeared in front of Noah. Hiya! Immediately, Yenju jumped up, turned around, and kicked Noah's head with a violent force that caused the air to tremble. Seeing that there wasn't even a sonic boom, even if this kick landed on a piece of steel, it would be able to shatter a piece of steel that was at least a meter thick into pieces, right? Not to mention a human's fragile brain. However, in the face of such a powerful kick from Yenju, Noah only slightly leaned to the side. Whoosh! The powerful kick immediately brushed past Noah's side and kicked the air. At this time, Noah suddenly reached out his hand and grabbed Yenju's small foot, who was about to charge past him due to inertia. He tightened his grip and lifted Yenju upside down. Too many flaws. After saying that, Noah threw Yenju and his hand in Rinzantaro's direction. The screaming Yenju turned into a shadow and heavily smashed into the panicked Rinzantaro. Bang! Amidst the dull thud, Yenju slammed into Ryutaru's abdomen like a cannonball. Ryutaru screamed in pain as he was sent flying along with Yenju, crashing into the ground not too far away. Ugh! Yenju covered her head with tears in her eyes. So dizzy, oh. Rinzantaro covered his abdomen with a pale face. It hurts. The two of them struggled to get up from the ground, but their vision suddenly darkened. Although the battle was short, I have a rough idea of your current level. Noah sighed. As a rabbit-type initiator, Yenju's speed, leg strength, and kicking have improved a lot compared to a year ago. However, her combat acuity seems to have decreased. Perhaps it's because she's been dealing with low-level protozoa and hasn't met a good opponent? I'm not slacking off. President. Yenju said angrily. For the past year, I've been following President's instructions and training my speed and kicking. I'm not blaming you. With your current strength, as an initiator, it's a bit of an exaggeration to say that you're in the top 100 IP rankings. However, it shouldn't be a problem for you to enter the top 300 IP rankings. Noah patted Yenju's head and glanced at Rinzen Taro, who was sitting on the ground. The problem is with me, right? Rinzen Taro sighed as if he had given up. I know that Yenju is very strong. It's all because I'm too weak that I'm dragging her down. Are you weak? Noah looked at Rinzen Taro deeply and smiled. Maybe. For a moment, Rinzen Taro felt like he had been seen through. This made his heart palpitate, and he quickly changed the topic. Speaking of which, Noah, I didn't expect you to be so strong. Even Yenju isn't your opponent. You're invincible in close combat among all the police. If you can get a good gun to make up for your long-range combat, it'll be hard to find a match for you in the entire Tokyo area. Hearing this, Noah fell silent. A gun? You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.